Okay, and we are live. Welcome, everybody, to another OSR Tabletop with myself, Richard Bloodworth, and I am joined today for the first time. We've never actually spoken to each other or met, prior to this. So this is Greg Christopher, probably better known as Chubby Funster.
Yep.
Now, is that Chubby Funster Games, or is it just Chubby
It technically is. I mean, technically now, for years it was Chubby. I put Chubby Funster Games, and now I guess I need to start calling it Chubby Funster LLC, because that is now the official name. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you start publishing, you have to.
Yeah. Once it gets locked in. Yeah. I picked it as kind of a goof name back in the Google Plus day, like 2010, 2011, right. And I like Ricky Gervais. He has a little bit on that they always bring up his weight whenever they talk about him, and they would call him Chubby Funster, which is Funster's like comic in
right.
Okay, right. And I just thought it was funny. I'm a joking kind of person. I think I'm a lot of people know me from making quips in YouTube comments during live streams, because I try to just crack jokes all the time. So yeah, it just became a brand, a personality. Like, it fits. I think it kind of captures my personality a lot more than I ever would have thought back in 2010, but it does. So
yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, my name is a made up name as well. So it's not Bloodworth. Yeah. It's not Edward James Bloodworth like on Facebook and everything. Bloodworth originally came out of the fact that I was a huge Captain Blood fan. Huge Errol Flynn fan back in the 1980s, and then I was playing James Bond 007 Victory Games.
Oh yeah.
And I had to come up with a character for that, so he became Hollingsworth. And then once, I want to say it was around 96 that High Seas Trader came out, and I needed to come up with a captain name for the ship, and I was going to go. Pirate, or privateer.
Good captain name. Yeah, that's good.
So then I was like, I just took the both. I took Blood and then Hollingsworth and slapped them together, and there was Bloodworth, and so that became my gaming channel name, going from 96 until really currently today. I've only been starting to shift my name towards my real name after I retired from New York City public schools in 2022.
Yep. So, Eric Pinkar did the same thing for a while.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. So.
Yeah. New York City was, especially during Bloomberg, it was like notorious for, scoping out and looking for union members that were, whether you're police or teacher or whatever, particularly teachers, and just looking through your social media and everything. So, so I used to tell all of my membership that it was like, on social media, do not use your real name, or don't connect it to schooling, don't connect it to the union, don't, just go straight up. And so I ended up with two accounts. I had my gaming account and then my personal account, But anyway,
I was friends with Joe the lawyer for probably over 10 years before I saw his face. He kept his face hidden because he was a lawyer, he didn't want any problems,
Right.
And so I get it. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to live in a time when some random person that you've never even talked to before can get mad at you for something you don't even know they heard you say, and then try to ruin your life over it. It's
yeah.
It makes you want to bring back like Viking Weregeld, and right, it's gonna. If you want a piece of me, you got to come and take it.
Right.
It's so annoying.
Yeah. So yeah,
No.
the amazing adventure of the internet, is really, that's one thing that it is. So just before we came on, you were talking about, you started off with Google Plus and everything. So that's where you started to really dabble into, I guess, this thing that, we're doing now. And, but where did you start your tabletop role playing? Like,
I first played a game of Rifts when I was like 12 at a summer camp, and Rifts was a lot for a 12-year-old kid to get hit with. And then the next year at the same summer camp, there were guys who were playing second edition D&D, and I got really into that. And it's kind of like, every year I'd go back to this camp and you see the same guys that you knew from before. And eventually I got my parents to get me the Undermountain box set for second edition with the huge maps and all the stuff. And like that's like the earliest thing that I can still remember today as like a particular product, like knowing a particular thing.
Right.
I love the hell out of that box set, and went from there. I was the one who was the most into it, learning and reading in the books, and so I ended up becoming the GM, and then I've just been like a most often GM person in every group I've ever been in throughout my whole life. I just love it. It's great. I love role-playing games. It's awesome.
Cool. Now, how soon after your discovery of Shadowdark did you know that you were going to start writing materials for it?
Well, right before Shadowdark came out, I had gotten to a point where I had released the second edition of my own kind of OSR Heartbreaker, and I had kind of it's kind of like I've said my piece type of thing. Like I think that this is the best way to do things, or whatever. And so I was looking for ways that I could take what I'd already written and just kind of adapt it. I was actually planning on doing an equipment guide for Old School Essentials, because my friends would say that the thing that they think was the greatest aspect of my OSR game was all of the equipment. And so I was getting ready to do that. I was in the mindset of I'm ready to convert this stuff. And then Shadowdark hit, and Eric Tenkar asked me to play in a live play of it just to see how it goes. Because people were talking about this game. Let's just play it for a session. And I just got the sense like this is going to be big. Like this is especially I come from a not 100%, but a strong graphic design background, and man, the way that it's put together from a teaching perspective to go into what your background, it's extremely effective visual design of conveying this information, putting it together, and I was like, this is great. So I'm going to take the stuff that I've already decided I'm ready to start converting and just start converting stuff to Shadowdark.
Right.
And I had converted a lot of things before the Kickstarter even closed, and I had a final copy of the book. I have a book out there it's still called Novice Magic, because I only had first and second spell levels.
Right.
So it was more first and second level spells, but I didn't want to write any third level spells because I didn't even know what they were yet.
Yeah.
So it was like that's how early I got on the train. A lot of the majority of Shadow Sun was written before the Kickstarter closed.
Right.
And I made some adjustments after the fact. I still have kind of nagging ideas about things I'd like to go back and change in some of these products because I didn't know a particular thing when it launched. And so when Western Reaches really comes out, and I have 100% clarity on what is in it, I plan on releasing something that meshes up with it, like a lot of the stuff that I've done, like the player companion stuff and the GM companion stuff,
Right.
To really bring the same level of what I do to Western regions. Because a big part of Chubby Funster brand, I think, is that I take whatever is in the existing thing and I blow it out. Like you know, if she wrote a D12 table, I wrote a D20 table. If she has, you know, 3 things, I'm going to put in 7 more things. You know, whatever the thing is, I do more of it. And so I'm ready for that. I'm excited for that. That's been kind of the bread and butter of Chubby Funster. And then the 2 settings, Shadow Sun and Shadowrim, have also been very successful. I've been a longtime lover of Skyrim and Dark Sun, and my perspective was there's no way that the people who hold the IP, you know, we rag on WotC all the time, but Bethesda's the same way. That I don't think they were going to ever release something for Skyrim that would satisfy me. They can release stuff that, just like Fantasy Flight can do Star Wars stuff, or I think it's Mophidius that does the actually licensed Skyrim stuff. They just don't do it the way that I want to do it. They don't do it in an old school way. They don't do it the way I think it should be done. So I said, I'm just going to kind of take these things for myself, file off the numbers, and then just go forward with it. You know, Wizards is never going to make Dark Sun in a way that satisfies anybody who actually likes it.
No, they don't have the, well, now they don't have the capacity to do it. You know, and they never had the guts to do it either. Because you know, it's like when we talk about like some of the movies from like the 70s and 80s, especially comedies and everything, like Blazing Saddles could never be done today.
Or Back to the Future.
Yeah, or any of those.
You would never be able to make Back to the Future again. Yeah.
Yeah, you would not be able to make so many of those classic you know, movies that are really timeless, you know, and then but they're not from this time. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's pretty amazing.
They're timeless. The problem is that the people who are doing this stuff today are not timeless.
Right. Exactly.
They are so focused on certain things being wrong to even do. They can't make a movie that acknowledges people's base feelings about a particular thing, because they want to deny that people even have the base feelings about a particular thing. So the characters don't resonate with anybody. Mm-hmm. I brought up my son is big into Star Wars. We talk about the scene in New Hope when Luke is standing on top of the Tatooine house, looking out at the 2 suns, and R2-D2's gone, right?
Yeah.
And he's like staring at, and like there's this really pensive moment of like, this guy is evaluating his whole life, and what is he doing? Is he on the right track? Does he need to do these things? There's so much risk. There's so many decisions that he has to make. You know, that's a real human moment there.
Right.
And they would either cut it out now, or they'd interrupt it with somebody making a Tony Stark type comment in the middle of that pensive moment. Yeah, they just can't let those things happen. They can't. Yeah, they just don't. They have to twist everything to what they want the world to be, rather than how people are. You know, young men, young women too, have moments where they don't know what they're doing with their life, where they're staring off into the sunset. And if we act like your whole life is just an endless stream of quippy jokes, like in Marvel or something like that, that just doesn't, that's not real.
Yeah. And it doesn't even carry over in Marvel anymore. They've done it too many times.
Yeah, it's burned out.
Yeah. You know, people are just tired of it. It's like, you know, hearing the same joke, you know, 70 times, you know, is just not going to land the same way that the originally done. So, Shadowrim, so I picked it up, and, you know, I immediately shifted. I was looking to run a Shadowdark campaign, and I was running my my players through each of the cursed scrolls. So it's going to do, we're just going to run campaigns, run through the cursed scrolls, then wait for the Western Reaches to come out, and then start introducing those. And then I discovered Shadowrim. So, I grabbed a hold of it and we started going through it. We made characters last Saturday, and I'm looking through it, and I do have one question.
Yeah.
So I see how you have the 9 signs, and those are the traits that they have, but I don't see where thieves fall in. I don't see where some of the characters. So are we supposed to take the very generic character class from Shadowdark and then import
you don't need the character class because there's elements of being a thief that are scattered across the different signs.
Oh, so yeah,
and I feel like part of the thing of Elder Scrolls is everybody is their own fighter, thief, wizard. They're everything, and so you can attempt to do you with your just running a dex check, any kind of thief ability that you want.
You just run it,
or wisdom if it's related to wisdom instead of dex, but there are sign stars on the constellations that give you thiefy type bonuses. You just have to roll them. You'd have to
you have to roll them, or
I feel like by having true kind of every option is represented, like the 2d6 tables for talents in the core book.
Mm-hmm.
There's ranges, like 2 to 5 is this, and 6 to 7 is that, right? These are every single individual number is represented in those constellations. Yes. And so when you roll up a character, it's going to be unique every time.
Virtually every time.
Odds of it being the same as somebody else are infinitesimal. So I wanted to create that, and then there are a lot of power. I've had people tell me well, they don't feel like doing that is the same power level as a class, and I point out that they're not taking into consideration everybody can also do alchemy, just like in Skyrim.
Yes.
Everybody can do enchanting, just like in Skyrim.
Yes.
So you're not that's not your whole class ability set. You've got the ability to go grab all these alchemical ingredients and start making potions, and even some of the alchemical ingredients, just eating them to get the first level effect is an advantage from a D&D perspective. That like in Skyrim, it's so small that it's whatever. But giving somebody 5 seconds of invisibility or whatever it is, like that could be big in D&D, but not in Skyrim. So things like that, I think people don't take into account. That's really the only criticism that I've had from a balance perspective. Have people come back and say they don't feel that rolling off the constellations alone is as strong as the classes. But every constellation, you have an automatic one that you get.
Yes.
Which is it's like a part of your class essentially. And then you get one random chance, and some of the spells could be very powerful. If you roll Snake Eyes on any of those charts, you're going to have a really powerful first level character. That's just, I think, part of the old school way is that sometimes you're going to get a guy who has one really good thing. Not totally he's still got 3 hit points or whatever, but he's got this really good spell. So that kind of thing, I put a lot of thought into adding the alchemy and the enchanting system. Gives a real boost to just a first character. Being able to make your own healing potions if you can find the right stuff. That's huge.
Yeah.
I don't think you could, if you wanted to, play with a class from the core rulebook and just roll the signs as bonus talents, and you'd end up with more like 3rd edition, 5th edition D&D level of power level, where they're more heroes. I haven't played 4th edition enough to know if it's also 4th edition. I didn't get on that train at all, but I feel like if you want to play more of a higher powered, more secure character, then totally run it with classes.
Yeah, I know my players already said they were like, hey, it's only 50 gold pieces to pull from a different sign.
Exactly.
And I was like, yeah, you'll switch over and then you can pull from the different sign. And I do they lose that first innate power when they switch over to a sign?
I
Oh,
wouldn't.
okay.
I wouldn't rule it that way
All right.
because you're basically like in
You're
it's
dual
a
class, you're
polytheistic
dual
system.
classing
There's
basically,
no
or multiple class.
there's no
Multiple class.
penalty in Elder Scrolls for worshiping multiple gods. So
Right.
if they did, I would say from a lore perspective, you could cut it off. But I don't. I think if you're good enough to get to second level in Shadowdark, I'm okay with you keeping an extra base talent. I mean, usually it's a spell or just a simple ability.
Yeah.
It's not that much. And I really like the idea of somebody being able to take the blade and get shouts and then switch to something else and get magic as well so that they're hybrid.
Yeah. Well, that's how Skyrim is anyway. I mean,
exactly. There's no, I mean, this game is way more balanced than Skyrim. Holy crap! Like Skyrim is
Skyrim
all over the place.
You can basically follow, various professions just by joining the guilds, and now you're improving those skills because you all have those innate skills, and that's the other thing. Like everyone can lockpick. It's just that if you're of the thief sign, you're going to get a +5 initially, and then it stops doing that.
Well, have you seen that the standing stones are in the encounter tables?
Yes.
Yeah, I felt like that was the best way to do it because a lot of the stuff in Shadowrim is set up so that people can't know things in advance, right? Mm-hmm. So the alchemical ingredients are rolled randomly when you taste them for that reason, because otherwise I need to go get snowberries or whatever. But the standing stones I put as part of the encounter system so that you'll just randomly, if you're in the caldera, you will randomly get the standing stone that's in the caldera. But once you step away from that location, unless you like extensively mark it with, make sure your characters can find their way back to it, it's gone. When you walk away from it, it's over, and as soon as the boost fades, you're like, I don't know where the Astronach stone is again. It's gone, So you have to kind of go on a quest to find it again. So a lot of things are hidden in random systems like that, so that the player can't game it ahead of time. Because I'm totally guilty of this myself. You're playing Skyrim and then Alt Tab over to the wiki and look for what are the invisibility ingredients to put in this potion. Oh, okay, and then switching back. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure you couldn't do that. Yeah.
Cool. So you spoke about some of the other systems you have already already have done. So what is your next step? So what's 2026 looking like?
Well, couple things. One, I have a vampire game that's about to drop. Mm-hmm. I've talked about it some on X. I've talked about it a little bit on live streams, but I'm waiting for the Kickstarter page to be ready to launch. There's you can put one up as a preview and let people sign up to get notifications for your Kickstarter, and leave that up there so you can build up a reservoir of people that are interested. So when you do launch the Kickstarter, you'll be able to do the fund it in 2 hours or whatever. Right. And so I've been reading a lot of people's tips on how to do a Kickstarter, and I've set that up. So once that goes live, then I'll be everywhere talking about that product. So I'm just trying to kind of not give away too much of the thing right now, but that's going to go. And behind that, I have a Al-Qadim type adaptation. Cool. It's much more broad to include pretty much the whole Islamic world. Mm-hmm. And I think this is going to be the first product that I end up making at the you spent a lot of money on art for this product book, because there's kind of when you're an independent producer, for a while, you're trying to do what you can with stock art. You're trying to do what you can with public domain art. You're trying to make it so that it's as cost effective as possible,
Right.
because so many people have blown their whole reputation and plan and business, whatever, on screwing up cash flow. So I've tried very hard to not do anything like that. I know a few guys who've spent, $10,000 on art of their own money before it launches, and it's a lot of times that's worked. But I'm much more conservative than that. I want to make sure I have the revenue from prior products to back that. And Kickstarter for me is not a funding vehicle as much of a pre-order system and a marketing system. I've been releasing all these products without a Kickstarter, just putting them out on drive-through when they're ready.
Right.
But I'm moving up in the quality levels and things like that. So I need to kind of get into that. I'm not really naturally that marketing oriented and kind of always be closing personality. That's just not me. But I need to start doing more of that and start bringing it up. So as we move forward from this vampire game, it's going to be, and the vampire game looks good even with the art. Well, I'm not downplaying at all. I think it's fantastic, but it's not, I invested $15K in art fantastic,
Right.
So that's where I'm going to be trying to transition over the next year, is moving from producing the kind of things in the way that I have been producing them to having a longer production cycle where I'm more time for art investment, more time for if I eventually start doing offset printing, which I'm hesitant to do because of all kinds of reasons, I'm sure you know. And the whole tariff situation made me even more conservative about not wanting to do offset printing. But if I need to go that route, I will. I'm just trying to do everything very cautiously. For years, I'm good friends with Eric Tenkar and Rob Conley and Joe the Lawyer, Tim Shorts, that crowd. And I've told them, like, to me, the real peace of mind comes from vertical integration. That I do my own layout, I do my own writing, I do my own design, everything, art direction, everything except for purchasing art. That's the only thing that I'm having to actually contract out. And it makes it so that I'm not ever in a position where I'm overextended or I need to borrow. I need to run a Kickstarter to have the money in order to pay for the thing that I want to do. Like, I always want to have the money to pay for the thing before it's made. And so, like, this vampire book is written, it's done. I don't need the Kickstarter money to pay for anything. As soon as it closes, I'll send people the codes and the PDF to do the fulfillment through drive-through. That's totally good. To me, it's just a marketing distribution vehicle. But when I see people who have especially when the numbers start getting really big and they don't have the product finished, I worry about that. I could not do that.
Yeah, that's something I saw several years ago, and some people who had failed Kickstarters were actually saying, my mistake was that I launched the Kickstarter when I was only 40% done with the writing. And then all of a sudden, and this was long before 2020, 21 and 22, this was, going back to like 2016 and so. And
that's how Eric
made
his chops, was
and that
cracking on those people for years about all the failed Kickstarters.
Yeah. And bottom line, I think the majority was, I just, I hadn't finished the product yet. And then some people were coming out and saying, you don't even think about launching the Kickstarter until you're like 95% done, and as someone who used to do like program a school schedule, for an entire school. And I was thinking, because it was around that same time, and I was saying 95% done is not correct. I was like, I would want to be 100% done.
100%,
because I remember when I was programming a school and, I had, 27 teachers and their programs and student programs that had to fit in. And then and when the principal used to come to me and say, hey, where's the program standing right now? I'd be like, 80%. That's what you told me 3 days ago. And it'll probably be 80% 3 days from now, because every time I move one piece, I have to shift 2 others, and he says, well, let me know when it's going to happen. And I says, I'll let you know as soon as it happens. All right. And at another time it came in and I was like, I have one more piece to put into the puzzle. And I shifted like 3 things and bang, it was done. It was like finding that last puzzle piece that just slid into place. And I was like, boom, it's completely finished. Handed it to him. And he was like, well, why did that take so long? I was like, because it's all of these components that you're not really done until all of a sudden, like magic, it just suddenly fits in.
Yeah. And video games are like that. That's why when they have a very rushed production schedule, you can really tell, because there's so many things that cross-pollinate within the system. And if one thing is off, then it screws everything up. But I'll let you read this chat from Ultra.
So the Ultra American TTRPG member for 2 months. Thank you very much for that. And message, I enjoy every single Funster product I've bought. All right. So that's pretty awesome.
That's great to hear.
Hopefully you bought more than one. Right? It's like, I really love this one, but
well, have you looked into Terra Invictus?
Terra Invictus, I've heard of that.
Okay. Let me share it with you.
Yeah, sure.
Let me pull it up here, because I think that it'll blow your mind about how to do hex crawling now. So I had originally written this for my own OSR system, and then I adapted it to Shadowdark. And as I was adapting it, I had this icon system that I used to just organize information. There's a weather icon, there's a trade icon, there's a military icon, and so on. And what I realized was, at the same time I was watching solo play videos for the first time. Mm-hmm. My friend Matt Jackson is really big into solo play. I was watching some of his videos, and I realized that you could use the icons to drive a solo game within the same product that you're using, that you can use regularly, that a GM could run. So I developed this. Let me share it here. So
let me add to the scene. There we go.
Yeah. So let me zoom in a little, so you can see, like, every interaction has this icon system, right? And there's all these other icons. And using a solo system, you resolve them in the order that they're in, and you can have DC checks to access these pieces of information. So if your characters don't make this dex check, you fall into the trap. If they don't make this intelligence check, then the enchantment affects them. Right. They can't avoid the combat. They don't find the thing that's in the hex, right? And then I put dungeons in there, and you can just use the rules that are in Shadowdark to build out the dungeon on the fly, wherever it is.
Right.
So then as you go through these hexes, let me just jump down. Let's go pretty far. Okay. So you see, like, in this hex, there's rough cataracts, which, for people that don't know, that's like a real sudden drop-offs with waterfalls. Okay. Like the Upper Nile Valley is particularly bad about this. That's where the name comes from. So it's a arduous terrain according to Shadowdark rules. There's hex crawl rules there, right? So when you come into the hex, you can read the weather. You can read what the kind of first look is around the hex. And then if you don't make that dex check I was talking about a second ago, you fall off this cliff.
Right.
Right. If you don't make the wisdom check, you can't avoid the wyvern.
Yeah.
Or wyvern, how people
Yeah.
pronounce it different. And you can't get the treasure that the wyvern has until after you kill it, because it's underneath it in the process flow.
Right.
Right.
I see.
So,
I see. Yeah. You just follow them down in order.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is like a 300 hex crawl.
Yeah.
With tons of these result. There's an owlbear here. There's a village of elves. They have a magic stone.
Which game is this?
This is called Terra Invictus.
Terra Invictus. Yeah. That's really cool.
So I didn't come up with this until after I had already done Shadowrim, but it makes me think of all kinds of things, like if I was ever going to go back and make a revised version of Shadowrim, I could do that. Here, let me throw the map up here real quick to give you a sense for how big it is. And this is the southern third of a whole continent.
I have
seen long-term plan is to do the rest of the continent. So like those cataracts are right in here where the river's coming down through these mountain ranges. So as you move around, you can find all that stuff, and it's all organized with that icon system. So I try to, in everything, be innovating with a new way of bringing that forward. And that's the kind of thing that I want to do with the Al-Qadim setting, is to not only have kind of like in Shadowrim, having a class design, having ancestries, having special equipment that's for the setting, having spells that are for the setting, and so on, but also having a really detailed and inviting world that you can run. And I'm sure so someone who's just GM'd a few times, running those hexes is super easy. It's not, that's what, to me, one of the greatest appeals of Shadowdark is that the demand load on the GM is so low. It's amazing compared to some of these other games. And so you could jump into a full hex crawl as a relatively inexperienced GM, but all the information is organized with that icon system. You can run it, and if it's simple enough for you to run solo play, you definitely can run it as a GM,
right?
And all those guidelines are there. So if you're the GM and you're like, I don't know what DC I should assign to finding this particular thing that's in the hex, it's right there in the solo play rules for what the DC would be. So you don't even have to make that up.
Yeah.
So that I'm always looking for ways to not just make a new product, but to move forward in a innovative way on a particular subject. Not everything is going to be super innovative, but every product I try to have one thing that I'm really pushing down the field. And that's been, I think, a big part of my success is people are like, I wonder what will be the cool thing about this book.
And I
end up getting it.
Cool. Let me do a share real quick, and let's make sure I have the right one. Yeah. So everyone, I'm hoping that it's appearing on your screen. I'm waiting for it to pop up on my side screen.
That's the one for my
OSR, old school.
Yeah, if you just click on Chubby Funster's name there.
All right,
and it could be like the first or second product. There it is. It's the third product.
It's 1, 2, 3. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
And so,
there that's the one for Shadowdark.
And that's the one for the. Oh, this one comes in soft cover. All right, I'm cool with that. Yeah. So it's yeah. I love hardcovers, but I have limited space, and so
I can see your shelf behind you.
Yeah. So it's and I'm capped out at just those 2 bookshelves. So it's like you can't go to a third. So when I get an opportunity to grab a soft cover over a hard cover, unless it's something like really, like
the only reason why Shadowrim is hardcover only is because of these the star sign pages.
Yeah,
these pages did not come out as well when it
as
was
well
in
on
soft cover. I don't know what it was, but
Mhm.
I was just like, I just can't approve that. I ordered a few
Yeah.
copies of it, and I was like, it's just not. It was too dark. You couldn't read it. I was like, I'm just gonna have to go with hardcover only.
Yeah, but you know what's good about it though is that it aligns
Perfectly
completely
matched.
with it. It completely matches, and so that's a selling point in my mind. So, but anyway, yeah, you can go to drive-through and just do Chubby Funster. That's the easiest thing to find. And if you saw any of this stuff, like I'm definitely going to grab that as soon as I get back from vacation. So it's like,
Well, I had somebody suggest to me a couple of days ago. I hadn't even thought about this until they said this, but normally, I mean, tell me if this is different in your experience, but nobody's running hex crawls at conventions. Right?
no, and I was going to ask you
Not
about like you running at conventions. Do you like but hex crawls?
Yeah, it's dungeon crawl. Yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly dungeon crawls. I mean, certainly not in the way that you think about hex crawls. I'm trying to think if well, doesn't does Rob Connolly run his hex crawls?
I don't think so.
No,
I've played with him as my GM for
right.
6-month period before, but and we did a lot of movement around the map, but I've never played under him at a con.
Right.
But my understanding from people is it's always yeah. Oh, DM Blackwall says he ran. Yeah, it's almost always a very fixed map encounter dungeon crawl kind of location.
Yeah.
And somebody came up to me and they were like, "Hey, what about if you made like 5th or 6th level characters?" And a lot of times people don't get a chance to play a 5th or 6th level Shadowdark character because they die too fast.
Right.
But what if you just made pre-gens that were 5th or 6th level and then threw them out in the middle of that wilderness, and they have to find their way back to one of the towns? And I was like, oh, wow, that would actually be really good for a set piece hex crawl, like at a convention. I never would have occurred to me. I've always thought of it as, these guys are going into Barrow Maze, or they're going into I played in Shucked Oyster with the Black Lodge guys at North Texas. Like it's been that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of room for innovating in that front as well in terms of con games.
Right.
I think there's a lot of people that it's not that they're stuck in their ways, it's that they have a particular way that they do things and they're familiar with that way of doing it. And if you just showed them, that's one of the things. Oh yeah,
I was gonna say.
I know. I was on that.
Roger, I was going to
more
put that out
there with Rogers.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of, like, I think there's room. People, Shadowdark also proves that people are willing to try new stuff.
Yeah.
There's kind of a cliche of OSR people are closed-minded and only want to run one particular thing, and that has not been my experience at all.
No,
but that's, I think, what people on the outside have some idea that, like, these are guys who are playing original 1E, and that's all they do, and they don't care about anything else. And I mean,
that's not the case.
That is not the case. No,
we weren't brought up that way, actually. My time period in the hobby began probably about 10 to 15 years before yours, right? So I came in 78, and throughout the 80s, there wasn't anything like, I don't know anyone of the 20 or 30 people that I knew at the time that were playing, from my junior high school or high school later on, of all the people that used to game, none of us were just, this is our game and this is the only game that we run. I mean, we must have played or ran some 20 plus games during that era. Yeah, yes, we always played Dungeons and Dragons, at least once a week, but it was a mix of Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, TSR's Conan, uh, James Bond, like I mentioned. We tried several of the superheroes games, and we settled on Villains and Vigilantes. Um, we tried Warhammer. We tried, it was at least 2 dozen games that we dabbled around with. Almost every one of them from TSR. So, because TSR wasn't a one game company either, they were putting out like 10, 15 different games at one time. So, the first time I used Shadowdark was I never played it. I ran it at a convention. That was my initiation into Shadowdark, and I fell in love with it right from the get go. I was like, this is such an easy system to learn and to play, and it works ideally for convention play. And just like you were mentioning, like the adventure that I wrote for it, that I've run now 11 times at conventions, was written for 4th level characters. And that way I could amp up the challenge that they would face and everything. And it's primarily a wilderness traveling adventure as well. And I've always had various different outcomes, and only one time a close total party wipe. But most of the time, 2 or 3 player characters will get killed on it, and it runs its full course. But it's a great system for convention play, and there's certain systems that I've played in conventions that without tweaking them, they're unusable in conventions, right? It's like you have to specifically work them to work in that kind of a venue. I've played Hyperborea in conventions, awesome. I played a Rob Connolly game, awesome.
5.5 hour, 6 hour game on the last day in North Texas, where they went through, I think it was 5 GMs. Yeah. And everybody had a different setup, and you got to really get a feel for different GM styles in a very short period of time. It was very interesting. I'd never played a rotating GM thing with that many people. Like I've played it in like a small group, like we've got our 5 people that we got, and I'm tired of running the GM, so I'm going to let another friend take over. But to have like every time you go through a large double bronze door, you got a new GM. That's really cool. Yeah, that's really a new thing for me, and that was really cool. I've actually made the argument before. I forget where it was that I think the great thing about Shadowdark is it provides a chassis for adapting to other things, not just kind of in the way that the D20 system becomes a chassis that people modified into other things. If you want to respond to DM, I was actually headed for his question when I started saying that.
Yeah, I would love to see it, and I'd love to have you come on, and you can you can talk about it as much as you like, and I will definitely look it up.
Yep. But that's where I was going, is that one of my kind of long-term problems is all the things that I think would be an interesting project to work on, right? And I am a huge fan of, there's a video game called The Long Dark, which I think is the best survival video game that I've ever played. It's fantastic. And the premise is that your airplane goes down on an island called Great Bear Island, fictional, but not very far off of reality in northern Canada, right? And so you're trying to survive on this island with very limited OSR level of resources, right? And I actually think it would be a great thing to adapt over either Shadowdark or the I forget what it's called, the Free League system that Alien is based on, or
is that on Mutant Year Zero?
Mutant Year Zero, there you go. Zero, yeah. I feel like both of those systems are light enough that and easy to teach. I've run Alien a couple of times for a work function to do team building, and it works out really well. People pick it up immediately, like Shadowdark. And so I have kind of on my long-term list of things I'd like to do is make a survival game that is really intense. I've been running Gods of the Forbidden North for a couple weeks now. Third session is this Saturday, and it's the first game where I've really pushed frostbite and cold rules on the players hard. You know, that every day they're checking to see if it's raining, because if they're raining, then they're one level colder than if it's not. And if it's this, you're like, and really pushing it so that there was a time when they were like, we got to get to this place and start a fire because we're already at -2 penalty to all things. I mean, we got to get out of this crap. So I do think there's a lot of potential for that. I would love to do. I have limited time, limited bandwidth.
Right.
I have a day job. I have other things that take up my time. I have 2 kids. They're teenagers now, but they still take up time. And but I have a huge long list of things I'd love to do, but that is on it. I think survival kind of is it just called Wilderness Survival? That old map. People talk about using that map back in the 70s for all kinds of stuff that weren't even for that game, that they just used it as a hex map for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to get my hands on, actually, is the original and everything. They're available. You can find them on eBay and stuff.
I'm sure you could, yeah. I'm not a big collector person, just mentally, just not a big thing for me, but it does interest me. I like to look at old stuff. I like to have PDFs and digital scans of old stuff so I can go back and be like, oh, this is how they did this particular thing. I'm always trying to learn from what other people have done.
Right.
And
that's primarily what I do, is I use them for reference and everything. And every once in a while, like I'll say, you know what, I'm going to run this. I'm going to run this for, a couple of weeks or whatever, with my group of players, and they're always open to new things and whatnot. So I have a built-in group that I've been with now for about 3 years, and or actually a little bit over 3 years now. And they're always open to new game systems and everything. So it's I don't know if that's I'm just lucky, or if that's like a lot of people's experiences, because I hear a lot of times they're like, oh, my players don't want to play new games. They want to play the one game, like you were saying,
it happens
much earlier. And they says, well, what's your advice? I was like, just do a bait switch on them. Hey, I'm going to run this weekend. If you want to come, you can come. Where this is what we're going to be playing, and just wait. They will come if you're if you build it, they will come, right? So if you're running it, they will show up, because they're not there to play the very specific game that they really want to. They're there to play something, and you just break them. You break them out of the out of the rut that they might be in, where they're just I just want to play this game system. And I would never encourage my players to fall into that of, I'm just a one system person. I mean, even Gary Gygax, I'll say to people that talk about, well, Gary Gygax, this Gary Guy, I was like, Gary Gygax was a gamer. All right, he never told anyone to just stick to TSR products. Maybe that was a fault of theirs at the time, but he was like, oh no, you need to be running different genres, different different game systems, and in different modes. If you've never run a game at a convention, you really need to, if you want to fully immerse yourself in this hobby. And at least that's my opinion. So, and I think most people that run at conventions, they really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't done it before, I highly recommend it, because you will have a blast.
There's degrees of understanding a system, and a lot of times people only get kind of the first degree, which they get from kind of skimming the book. And there's a lot of deep. Soon, buddy, soon, Ultra is coming. it's done, man. It's done. It's all admin work right now. It's all administration. Yeah, Castles and Crusades is one of those games that's on. I have a list of games that I like. They're fine. I would put Hyperborea in the same category. I would put OSE. I would put a lot. There's a lot of games that I'm okay with. I'm fine with them. I'm not like their greatest fan. I think they're good, and they're good at a few things. They're not so great at other things, in my opinion. And I will play them. But then there's another list of games that are just I'm really enjoy. And so I don't play Castles and Crusades very often because usually I'm chasing after something else that I actually really, really want to play. Now, if somebody in my Saturday night group came and said, "Hey, I've prepped up this little campaign for us to run in Castles and Crusades, let's do it," I'm totally on board with that. You know, we rotate so that nobody gets really burnt out. We played. I see Acts 2 on your little credenza there. We played Acts 2 for 9 months. It was fantastic, but the level of player investment is really high, and players just kinda, I was the GM, and I didn't really feel that burned out about it. But they were tired of having to manage all the things that because they were 6th to 7th level, they were starting to really have a lot of things that they were having to manage. When you're 1st and 2nd level, there's really not that much player demand, but as you start getting actual potency in the world, you know,
start developing that domain, it's like wow, it's this is pretty, bust out the spreadsheets kind of kind of stuff.
And so there are a lot of people who just have like I don't have a deep knowledge of Castles and Crusades in the way that I do Shadowdark. And the example I think is poignant is there's a lot of people who have even read a significant amount of Shadowdark, but they've never actually run always on initiative in the dungeon. They've never done it. They've read about it, and I think when they read it, they go, I don't know that I'd do that, whatever, and then they just moved on. But actually running it that way and having people in the dungeon having to decide whether they're going to spend their turn looking through this room or if they're going to keep moving with the rest of the party that's going down the hall or whatever. Like running always on initiative is a totally different game than theater of the mind, take as long as you want to inspect everything kind of game. And then you add on top of that the torch timer, which people go, oh, this is arbitrary. But I actually got this insight from watching some solo videos of a guy running Terra Invictus, and he would set a timer on his phone or his watch or whatever and set it down, and then he's running the solo play, so he's not thinking about the torch timer at all. And then all of a sudden the torch timer goes off, and he's like, oh crap, and he makes a couple rolls, and he's like, they're in total darkness all of a sudden, and then they're having to adapt to that. But if you're running a torch timer and you're broadcasting to the players every 5 minutes, you've got 30 minutes left on your torch, so you've got 25 minutes left, then it's not going to have the same effect as your torch goes out, poof. All of a sudden you haven't been paying attention to it, it's out. That's a real different thing. And you don't get that from just skimming the book and thinking in your brain about how it might work. If you want to get deep insight into other games, you need to actually play them rigorously. Just before I forget, Dean Blackwell's question, 7 players in that Gods of the Forbidden North game. And I generally don't go over 5, but it's the module's calibrated that way. And one of my players is Rob Alderman, who's wrote it. So I couldn't pass up that opportunity. So I'm running 7 people, and I'm changing a lot to try to keep him on his toes, so he doesn't have to sit there and go, "Oh, I don't know how to get past this door." Everything is being shaken up, and that adds even more DM load to me. But it's a fantastic setting. It's a fantastic book. I'm happy to do it. Having a great time.
Yeah, I typically run between 5 and 8 players, for a number of different systems. But my maximum was on a steady basis was 10. I started with 12, but ended up with 10, and we ran 10 for about 6 weeks or so, and then I just let attrition take its course. So it eventually came down to 8, and we finished up 2 years later with those 8 players.
The BroSR guys talk about running games with a lot of people in the old kind of Gygax way back in the day, where they were running West Marches style games with lots and lots and lots of people. I've never done that. It's a thing I'd like to do, but I just don't have the time or the energy.
You have to have a lot of time to organize that and to coordinate it and to try to keep track of who is where and when and whatnot. And to me, that's just too much work. And I'm semi-retired, so it's like I would have the time, but I would rather just run 2 or 3 times a week and have two or three different games that I'm running, per week, than have to dedicate that amount of time into one or 2 game sessions. The other thing I'm not open to on that whole concept of it is that when players want to play, you make yourself available for them to play, and it's like, well,
that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's like, I can't just, I just can't pick up, and turn on a dime. It's like, oh, you want to play? All right, I'll tell my wife and kids, we can't have dinner now. I got to go run a game. It's like, it's not going to fly, So,
well, I mean, I'm sure you have the same experience that once you reach a certain level of popularity, of interaction with people through whatever the videos that you make, or I produce products, it starts to create a lot of emotional energy spending interacting with people.
mm-hmm.
And it's good. I love interacting with people, but it does take up time. Every time I write a response to somebody on Twitter, that takes up time. Every time I get a question from somebody on Discord or talk to somebody about that, just takes up time. And eventually you're like, I'm running out of time.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine committing to having players sending me private messages with what's it called? Off time or downtime orders and all that stuff. Like, oh man, that would drive me crazy. I shouldn't do it.
That's one reason why I couldn't. I tried. I was playing in someone's Twilight 2000 game, and he was running it. He was running it by post, and I was like, I can't do that. Play by post. There was just no way. I just was not getting a sense of it at all. And I was like, and you were just like, well, we're waiting on this person to send in the email, as to what their character is doing at the moment. And I was like, we're all hanging on this one person now, and
it reminds me of when I used to play Diplomacy, the board game by play by post. And that was a lot of just delays.
It's really hard, and I really couldn't wrap my head around it. I don't even like play by text for that reason. I always feel like I can express myself a lot better, for the most part, a lot better verbally, and go through that, and then having to type everything. I'm a horrible typer, so it's like trying to spit everything out in text. I just don't like playing by text. I mean, I played in Venture Satanis when he was first coming out with Chult, and he was running he was running and, one shots, in Schultz. It was always, oh, I only do text, and I was like, it just,
Wow, I didn't know that.
it was a lot of
I'm
fun.
familiar with Wenger.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was running play by text. Yeah.
Yeah, he was playing. Yeah. I mean, we would be on, whether it be Discord or on Roll20 or whatnot, but everything was being done on. I was like, that they have a video screen and an audio on this thing, right? It's like I know the box is this big, but it's just we could do audio. And he was like, no, I only do it by text. I mean, in person, obviously, you're playing it, but it was a lot of fun, but it just wasn't there for me. It wasn't interpersonal enough for me.
Yeah, I don't know that I can do that. I'm perfectly fine with running on. I run on VTT as my standard thing.
Yeah.
When I was at North Texas, is the first time I played in person in a long time because I'm just an introverted person. I don't like to go to places where there's a ton of people. And North Texas was a smaller venue with, about 500 people, I think it was. And so it was more manageable for me. But a sea of 5,000 people, I'm just like, no. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
And that's just, I don't knock people. I think conventions are great. It's just very, they say like when you're an introverted person, you can do the thing, but then it's exhausting over time. Right. Like I'm tired of it. It's like, I've had people tell me that I'm very sociable and talkative and so on, but it's just that over time doing it just drags me down exhaustion wise, and I'd rather be putting that energy into making stuff. I'm more of a maker, a producer. I really like Adam Carolla has a thing about that people get so caught up chasing happiness when what they really should be chasing is satisfaction. So at the end of a day where you installed a fence, you are exhausted and unhappy. But for years looking at the fence, you will be satisfied.
Right.
That's what you got to go for. There were times when I was really stressed about a particular section of a book. The vampire book, I had a real hard time getting through the final, like the high level treasure stuff. Mm-hmm. It was just, I would say that, and people would be like, have you considered this? Have you considered that? I'm like, I considered that 3 weeks ago. I'm way past where you're thinking I am. I'm deep in these tables, and I'm trying to come up with really unique treasure items in the 80s where I can't give out an iPod. I can't give out all stuff. It's got to be in a particular tech level and fit the setting and be realistic. So it was very demanding, but it's done now. It wasn't a happy period for me stressing out about all those items on the table. But now when I look at the table and it's done, I'm going to be very satisfied for a long time that I finished this product. And I think that's important for people to have as a goal, that you want to make something that you're going to be proud of having done for a while.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, you have to, in this hobby, you have to find what you're comfortable with and what you're looking to get out of it. And everyone is going to have a different approach to that, a different capacity for it. I'm certainly on board with you on, big convention, big con days are over, and I've since adjusted what I consider to be a big con, so anything over 1,000 people, I'm like, that's big, so ideally I like smaller cons. I like cons that are like 150 people, 500 on the upper end or so. And most of the cons that I do go to, or around that size. So Philadelphia Area Game Expo this past January was the largest that I've been to, other than of the gaming cons that I've been to, other than Gen Con 18 back in 1985, and and when I used to go to Comic Con at the Javits Center in New York City. I mean, that's 60,000 people there. It's like that's just ridiculous, in comparison. But
well, I live in Atlanta. I have Dragon Con here, and I've been a few times, but it is so overwhelming. Maybe this is just a thing for me, but I don't think so. It's so overwhelming from a sensory input perspective. There's so much sound. There's so many people. There's so much stuff that it just becomes overwhelming. Like I'm gonna just sit down and relax for a minute. Just so many things to take in, and I can do that, once every 5 years. But I'm not out there. I'm the kind of person who is not really jazzed up about going to the concert or going to the play or going to the thing, whatever. And that's just me. But I think it's good that those things exist. So I don't want anybody to get that impression. Like I think they're good. It's just not for me. For Gods of the Forbidden North, I was going to run it with OSE, and I have a guy in my group who is the original like Chubby Funster super fan. He was the biggest supporter and proponent of my very first OSR system, the first edition of Ambition and Avarice. And the thing that he really likes about it is I have kind of the classic saving throws, and then I created this idea, blending in ideas from Adventure Conquer King 1, that you would have what are called dungeon throws. So you have 5 saving throws and you have 5 dungeon throws. And the dungeon throws are like opening locks, climbing, what else? Sneaking, forcing open a door or whatever. And then that frees me up to not have to have a highly specialized thief class or a fighter class. And so I created a lot of classes that fall into a fighter thief hybrid design. There's instead of a kind of a dainty thief, there's a brigand who's just a forceful robbing, murdering type person, a thug. And so he doesn't have to have a D4 hit die and worry about getting but he can do all this stuff. And there's a flexibility in these dungeon throws of you can assign. So my guy puts points to make me much better at opening locks than you, and you put your points in sneaking and whatever. So you can customize them like that. And so when we started talking about doing Gods of the Forbidden North, Kerry is his name. He was like, we need to do this with ANA 1. And mechanically, it perfectly intersects with OSE on a monster's armor class, attack rolls, spell, all that stuff perfectly lines up. So we've just been running it like that. I can tell already that the magic spells are a little stronger than base OSE. They had a kind of the first real serious boss kind of NPC. They were able to. They had a stunning spell that stunned him for 3 rounds. It basically won the fight and allowed them to get a victory. I don't really care because the world is harsh as crap. If they get an easy victory against this guy, it's not a big deal. I'm not crying, but so they've done that. But it's been really good to not have to worry about who's the thief who needs to come up to the front and pick this lock. Who's the guy who's the tank who needs to stand in front. They're all tanks. They're all, except for the spellcasters are not tanks. But all the normal mundane characters are reasonably interchangeable in a pinch. So they have 2 savages, which are like barbarians, and they have a brigand, and they have the magic users are a shaman and a priest. And I, of course, had no idea knowing this when I wrote Ambition Avarice 1, but it matches perfectly with Gods of the Forbidden North, because this priest from first level, they can bring you back from having just been reduced below 0 hit points.
Right.
But you have to accept their god as your god. And so it works really well with a religious oriented campaign. And then the shaman is their kind of special power is communicating with spirit animals. And the half of the map is controlled by an Inuit type native culture. So the shaman fits in perfectly, the priest fits in perfectly. It's been an amazing thing. The only problem that I've had is that I wrote a second edition of this game, and so running the first edition, I'm constantly thinking, oh, this needs to be resolved like this, and then going, oh wait, that's something I did in the second edition, but it's not in the first edition. This is like the game designer's hell of when did I write the rule to be this way versus that way. But other than that, it's been great, and I think Rob has enjoyed seeing it run in a non-OSE system, because I'm sure he's play tested and run it tons of times in OSE. And so I'm really happy to be able to let him play in a different system with somebody shaking things up. I'm not trying to run it by the book because I'm play testing it. I'm trying to run it in a way that's exciting for them. So I'm coming from weird directions where he has no idea why that guy said that thing, did this, where, why did that place get burned down? We don't know. All kinds of stuff. And it's been really great. I think I really enjoy playing new stuff. I really enjoy seeing new stuff. Whenever I get a book, like when I got Gods of the Forbidden North, I told myself it was for my son because he solo plays and he had been watching some videos by a guy named Foxoff. It's an Irish YouTuber, has a great Irish brogue voice, and and my son really wanted. He's been solo playing for Gods of the Forbidden North, and my son has been solo playing stuff, and he likes those videos. So when I was at North Texas, I was like, Rob, bring me the books. I normally don't buy a lot of books for my shelf because I play online all the time, right?
Right.
I bought the hardcovers and the map and everything for my son, and then when I got home, I was like, maybe I should read this whole book.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon, then you're like, oh, I need to run this. So that's kind of how we ended up getting there. But every time I run into a product like that, it's just an endless list of things that I can see to learn for myself. Oh, he did it like this. I wouldn't have thought of doing it that way. He did it like that. I wouldn't have done it. I like watching the solo play videos of people.
Right.
Obviously, of course, when the guy's running Terra Invictus, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. But even other solo play.
Right.
Because I get to see basically somebody GMing themselves. And they go, well, I rolled this result, so I'm going to interpret it as meaning blah, 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 right? And you can see the reasoning going through their head. And there's just so much. It's so rich, such a rich hobby in terms of unique flavor that everybody brings to the game. That's, to me, it's unbeatable. I love video games, but it doesn't hold a candle to real good.
So RPGs, well, that's an interesting, thing. I know I've actually been covering, going through my shelf, and I'm right into the midst of covering 4 Against Darkness, which is, by far one of my first solo RPGs and still a favorite. I mean, I just love that system. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
I got it and skimmed it, but I haven't looked at it in a long time.
So that's a really good system, and but to hear someone say that the solo RPGs, tabletop RPGs are more engaging than, let's say, Skyrim or any of those AAA RPGs that are all solo on whether it's Fallout or Skyrim or any of the Elder Scrolls or Mass Effect and whatnot. It's a comparing the two and saying this is more engaging than that is not something I've heard someone say before, but thinking about it, it's like you're thinking more when you're doing a solo RPG, tabletop solo RPG, than you are in a video game. And that I think, and you're, like you said, you're not just rolling the dice and following what it's doing. You're rolling the dice, then looking at the result and interpreting, how do I best interpret this, or how do I best use this result in order to enhance the situation. Now, anytime that I've ever been playing a solo RPG myself, I've always kind of, in my head at least, and sometimes even writing, taking notes on the side, I'm always thinking of writing a short story based on that, when I played the Star Wars, The Old Republic, I had this, character, and I was like, I'm going to play a Sith Marauder. And I wrote a whole short story just following, going through that initial thing. And it really, the game was an avenue for me to write short stories, and then to post those up on the amateur literature pages on the internet. And, I could definitely see doing live plays like you mentioned, and doing solo stuff. There's another great channel out there. I don't know if he's still doing them though, and that was Artichoke Dip. He's a big solo. Yeah, so Artichoke Dip, great stuff going back years, and he was at the time like probably the person to watch. There's others too. There's the RPG guy, and there's that does solo RPG guy. Solo RPG guy is another channel that I follow, and but yeah, there's a lot of really good channels out there that just focus on solo play, and almost all of them are really knowledgeable about that aspect of tabletop role playing. So it's really cool.
And I think going forward, like with this Al-Qadim type setting, I think it's important to build in the structure there so that you could pick up the book and run it in a conventional way with a group as a GM, never even think about solo play, but that all the things that the solo player needs are built in to the same structure.
Right.
And then if they want to run it that way, they can. And it's definitely to me, the biggest argument for it is that you get 100% of the value out of the book compared to other methods. So even if you are GMing it, which how many books do we have that we've never actually run,
Yeah.
But even if you are GMing it, the party that's playing it will miss a lot of content just because they don't go that way. They don't explore, they don't go down that tunnel. They never go over to that mountain. They never do whatever it is. And if you're solo playing it, you can solo play it multiple times, hit all of those things like reading a choose your own adventure book and making sure that you've read every page, take every path through the Lone Wolf book or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a real value, because when I first got Terra Invictus to a place where it was playable from a solo play perspective, my son wanted to start play. He's 14. And he would spend hours and hours going through it, And this is a kid who, if I handed him Shadowrim, he's not going to read every hex description for Shadowrim and think about it. But because it was a narrative flow of him going through it, rather than it being, I'm going to read this as if I'm going to GM it, he was reading it because he wanted to know what was in that hex. So that's really got a big bite of kind of player commitment out of him that I don't normally see from him. So to me, I think it's really, there's a value in having, if you buy this setting, if you buy this, whatever format it is, whether it's just a module or full thing, you'll get the full value out of it by being able to solo play it whenever you want, even if you never run it for your group. Even if your group says, we have no interest in playing in that, we don't like deserts, we're tired of Nordic settings, whatever it is, if your group isn't down, then you can just do it yourself.
Right. All right, let's see. So real quick, I just wanted to let everyone know, I put up the link for my Discord. So anyone that is viewing, whether it's from your audience or mine, if you're not already on the Discord, you can jump in on that Discord channel. And I do a lot of, open gaming. So if you want to do like a GM +1 kind of situation, say, hey, I'd like to play this game. Do you have it? Can you run it? I'm available just 2 hours to just mess around with it a little bit. I'm open for that kind of a thing. As long as it fits within my kind of open schedule. I have a fairly open schedule. Actually, next week I start a vacation. So, so
where are you going?
Well, I'm home, but I work for the teachers union as so we follow the school year. So, our school year ends after this week. Then we're into our summer hours, and I'm not working again until late July, and then the first week of August. So I actually have probably about 3 weeks off. Now, one of those weeks I'm going to the Bahamas. So, but the other 2 weeks I'm wide open. So, I will certainly be available to run little one-shots here and there if you want to just try out any new systems, and that would be a great thing to do. Especially since we're practically already packed for that vacation. So it's like I don't have to worry about the wife, and kids being like, hey, we have something to do today. She's off too. She works in the schools as well. So that's up there for you if you want to jump in there and or just chat or do whatever. It's a great, Discord, very, about 200 people or so. And we just talk about gaming and stuff. So that's up there. And I'm certainly going to share some of these things that were brought up. So I'm going to bring up Terra Invictus again and share that out there. So everyone go check that out. I'm going to throw up Horde Wars, and I'm going to throw up Gods of Forbidden North. So, put out there for everyone. Also, Roger came on. And so Roger, yes, I am going to shout out for the Central New York RPG Con going into its second year now, which will be sometime next. I just drew a blank. Sometime next June. So that really excited about that. And then other cons as well. So I know you already said you don't like big cons, but so North Texas was your first con in a while, and
it was. And I have 3 people in my game group that are in Texas.
Yeah.
So just being close, they were already going anyway. And then I have a lot of friends now from publishing that we're going to be there. Mm-hmm. And I need to do things like this to get, be there from a presence standpoint and talk to people about stuff. And it was the first time I had ever had anybody come up to me and recognize me for something that I did. Like, are you the Chubby Funster? Are you Greg Christopher? That was interesting.
Yeah.
But I I have to kind of do it deliberately because it's not something like I'm just an introverted person.
Yeah.
I would consider my wife is a very sociable, outgoing person, and I refer to her as my social director many times. And I had not planned on going to North Texas. I mentioned that the guys were talking about meeting up and seeing each other in person. She was like, "Well, why aren't you going?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'd have to take off of work. I'd have to do this stuff, whatever." And she was like, "No, you're going. You're going to go." And she jumped on it and started planning and doing stuff. So, thank her, guys.
Yeah. You're a lucky guy with that.
She's a great advocate for that.
Good.
We have a marriage where we divide up stuff like that. That we're, she's very good at some things, and I'm very good at other things, and we don't get those mixed up. So she's the person who plans all the get-togethers and when we're going to have this and going to go to this person's birthday
really cool.
party, whatever, right? And I just I wouldn't have gone, but she was like, you're making a name for yourself now. You need to get out there and do this stuff.
Oh, that's nice. That's really, really good.
Yeah. So I'll have more time. When you have younger kids, you have to hold a lot of your vacation back just in case something happens with your kids.
Right.
Yeah. They're both now, I mean, they're about to be 15 and 17, and I don't really need the vacation time for them as much anymore. If they get sick, they're sick. I'm like, they can take care of it. I don't need to handhold them through it anymore. So I do have more time.
You got to raise them like they're Gen X, right? They're feral. Yeah. You throw them outside for the rest of the day.
Roger brought up about New York. My wife loves New York. She lived in New York for like 15 years.
Yeah.
She lived in a building right next to Battery Park where she could see the Statue of Liberty. Like, she's a hardcore New Yorker.
Yeah, you don't want to go to New York now.
Yeah. But I could justify it by going, honey, we'll fly in and you can go to Manhattan and I will go to this convention or whatever, right? So I could justify things in that way. But we'll see. I mean,
there's also ShireCon, which is actually closer to New York City as well, and that's in September. And that's
I've heard great things about ShireCon from Eric.
If you're running around with Eric, and Eric goes to ShireCon every year, pretty much. I'm pretty sure he's going to go there again this year. And it's pretty much the same group of.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he does. He goes every year.
Yeah, we're starting to form up a kind of a network of YouTubers and gamers, and we all go to the same, whether it's in New York, a Connecticut, a Massachusetts, Philadelphia, Philadelphia as well. Although the time of the year for that is a bit problematic, but we're pretty much rubbing elbows at 3 or 4 conventions every single year now. And so that's a really nice grouping. I would love to get to North Texas sometime. I'd love to, like, if there's anything like in Atlanta, my niece actually lives and works in Atlanta, so I could go to Atlanta, and
unfortunately, Dragon Con is not really a place where you want to run a lot of games. It's more of a spectacle with cosplaying people, and where they have like panel discussions where industry people talk about stuff, and there's a huge vendor hall and that kind of, like, it's more of a show up to absorb the things rather than I'm sure there are people who run games, but
I'll ask my niece about that, because she works. She's a production manager at an anime studio in Atlanta. So she works for Bento Box, which they do little skits and like cartoon type things and such. And she does a lot of graphic art and everything on the side, hers, but she's the production manager there, and I can almost guarantee that they probably do.
I'm sure they do, being
go
animated.
there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely look into myself to go down there, and like I said, I can, stay in her place and then go to the convention and whatnot, and and Atlanta's not too crazy of a drive for me. That's like 12-hour drive or something like that. So I could probably
getting through North Carolina will be the pain in the ass.
Yeah. Well, I've driven
North
to Florida.
Carolina is so rugged.
So, yeah, I've driven to Florida from New York, so it's it is a schlep. But I'm much older now, and it's a little bit harder to go much more than 8 hours. I haven't done a greater than 8-hour trip in a long time. But
Tampa's 9 hours from me.
Yeah,
and that's about as far as I think I could go in a day and not want to kill myself.
Yeah.
It's brutal. But it's mostly just flat endlessness going from Atlanta to Tampa, whereas going through the Appalachians is a different experience. But
all right, so badge sales will probably open within the next month. All right, cool.
Yeah, North Texas has already sold 60% of next year's badges.
God, that's crazy.
Yeah, they have a hard cap at like 600, I think.
Yeah, some of them are doing it way too soon, in my opinion. Like they're talking about badge sales for like Philadelphia Area Game Expo 3 is they sold off all of their VIP badges and everything like that. And that's not until January. I mean, it's like, and they've been sold out for now. So they're like 8 months in advance, and they're sold out. So it's kind of crazy how fast some of these are filling up. So I have a hard time projecting that far forward and saying, all right, I have a couple cons that I'm like, all right, I'm definitely going. I promise I'm, going to make it out there. But I really don't know unless it's, unless I'm like 1 month in. I was like, okay, I know for sure I'll be there, kind of thing.
I've been there most of. I actually ended up getting a badge for North Texas after they had been sold out.
Yeah.
Because I'm friends with Mike Battalato.
Right.
And I had said, are there anything left? And he was like, no. You're just going to have to show up and get a badge at the gate. And then like a week or two later, he was like, oh, somebody canceled.
Yeah.
You want the badge? And I was like,
that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just luck. But I'm really happy that happened, because I was able to I was in 7 games with people that I really wanted to see GM.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I planned it out. I had basically 2, and 1 games. So that each day I only had 2 games a day. I had plenty of time to do other things and talk to people around those, but I still got to play in those games with those people. And it was really good. It was great. So I've already bought the badge for next year, because I don't want to get into the same right. Some of the guys in my Saturday night group had to show up at the door, and that meant that they couldn't pre-register for tons of stuff,
Right.
So I was like, oh man, you got to do the pre-registration. I can't go in and just be like, I have no idea what I'm doing today.
Right.
I couldn't do that. So I'm really glad that I got to do that kind of thing. I think that's important. And I know that there's kind of what games are somebody going to run? You asked me like, or when are you going to run a Shadowrim somewhere? But to me, I'm always looking like, who can I
play with?
See how they do it. It's like a research project for me. Like, I want to see how this guy runs a game. I want to see how that guy runs a game, and then capture bits out of how they work and process that. I really, I said to, I can't remember who I said this. I was like, that it's like I'm like a zoologist. I'm coming in and I'm like, let's study this animal here. What's he doing? You know, and I think that that's how we move the ball down the field is saying, okay, this particular practice is a practice worth enshrining in the book in some way. You know, um, all the kind of best practices that you get in business come that way. Nobody just decides this is the best practice. It's, you know, you go through years of doing your business and you go, okay, the way this guy did it is the most successful way. So
Right.
this is what we're going to do. So I come at it from that angle. I'm in learning development for corporate projects, like how to teach somebody to use this $75,000 machine,
Right.
and I have to constantly be finding, oh, how can we teach this better, faster, quicker, more deeply, that they remember how all these things work, and it's not just something they do and then walk away and forget. And I try to take a lot of those lessons and apply them back to role playing.
Right.
So one of the things that I've done already for Gods of the Forbidden North is, you know, Rob is so focused on getting everything there in the book, you know, like that's his job, you know, right?
Yeah.
And he's trying to make sure, okay, all these things are in place and whatever. And I'm going into it going, how can I teach somebody all this stuff in the fastest way possible?
Right.
And the student is me, you know. So I'm like, what can I do? So I start coming up with, I've made several little worksheets and I've sent them over to Rob, and I'm like, you can have these. If you I made them for me, you know, like I've used some of your, you know, map art or whatever so that I can remember where these places are. But like, I made this little handout for me so I can have it right here next to my computer. So I don't have to be flipping back to that page in the PDF or whatever. Like I can just look and go, oh, that language is the language of the
Right.
giants in this setting. This is the thing. What just quick reference notes and all these little things that I put together, and over time, going to try to make, you know, a thing for him that will help teach it as fast as possible, and just give it, like, I'm not doing it for like as a project for Chubby Funster. It's just Greg. Like, this is the thing I want to be able to sit down with this book and explain it to somebody as quickly as possible. So here you go, you know. And I think the more we have that focus, the more we have, how can we, that one of the great advantages of Shadowdark is it's super simple to pick up and teach. Same thing, like, what are the things that we can do so that every game plays like that? Every game we can sit down and teach it to somebody in 5 minutes because we've made the right information structure to do that.
Yeah, that's you know, that's something that I think is like really important to just experience how other people run games, and to, you know, you're going to pick up things, you know, bits and pieces. I'm exactly in the same, you know, same philosophy of that. What Off Grid says here is really a great point to make, and I'm in complete agreement with him. I think 2 or 3 games, playing in 2 or 3 games and running one each day of a convention, I think that's a perfect balance. I've done crazy things like running 5 different game systems, you know,
Ooh.
during a convention, and then playing in another 3, you know, in a 2-day time frame, and just brutal. I would never make that mistake again. But as far as like wanting to play in people's games, I first opportunity I got to play in Frank Metzler's game was not just the past page, but it was the year before that. And I went and you know, spoke to him quite a bit before the game, sat down right next to him during the game, and just watching him manage a table of 8 players with 8 backup players. So he had 16 people sign up for this. And the whole time I was just trying to get how he was doing everything. He was only rolling 2d6 the entire time. All right. Always behind the screen, but just always rolling 2d6. And I think it was the system that they used back in, the early 70s when they were role playing, before Dungeons and Dragons was using using the polyhedron dice and everything. They were just using, and I remember looking at how David Wesley was running and how Dave Arneson was running and everything. And I think it was a 2d6 system. And the
It's a wargaming convention for a lot of things.
Yeah. So yeah. I think it all came down to if, and they were the same color die too. So it wasn't like you could tell that. I think it was just a matter of if he rolled doubles, it would mean something. If he rolled high, above and below, below meant you were dead, pretty much. And then we were just rolling a d20. There was never, no damage dies or anything like that. So if we attack something, all right, you hit it. All right. If probably 2 or 3 hits killed anything, if you got hit, you were dead. You know what I'm saying? It was like all of these 16 people, only 5 of us actually survived, but the first person that got killed, he just took it back, he stepped out of his seat and just stood behind everybody else, and he was killed in 5 minutes. He stayed there the entire time. He stayed in the back row and just watched. And every single person whose character was killed would just step back and then just remain and just watching to see how this whole thing turned out, and so it was an incredible experience. I was trying to just learn as much as I could from just watching how he managed that. The next big game or big name that I played with is Alan Hammock was running Ghost Tower of the Inverness, and to be in the running the adventure that the author wrote is just another really exceptional experience. And again, his game was very brutal too. It was my character got killed at the very end, and it was but I still enjoyed every moment of it. And then I played in Zeb Cook was running Oriental Adventures at page 2. And to be in his game was just, phenomenal. So there's a lot of people. And I played in Rob Connolly's game. I played in Jeffrey Talanian's game. I played in Eric Tenkar's game that he was running. So I'm definitely on board with what you're saying is when you go to conventions, there are going to be certain people I want to play in that game. Yeah. The one thing I will tell you is, though, if you ever go to some of those smaller conventions, especially ones where they're seating maybe 5 to 6 players, there's always room for a 7th. All right. Mm-hmm. I've never seen anyone turn away, and a lot of times that happens. People come into conventions and they'll be like, hey, can we sit in and watch? And I've had it at my own table. I've had it at, seen it at other tables. And I've never seen anyone turned away. It's oh no, you could sit and play if you like too. You don't have to just sit there and watch. And it's usually kids that are being brought over by their parent and everything. Hey, do you mind if they just sit down and watch you run the game? No, not at all. Have a seat and play. Jeffrey Talanian actually walked his daughter over to my table, my Gangbusters table, and said, do you mind if she joins out? And go right ahead. She was the best player at the table. I
played a Gangbusters game at North Texas with Glenn Hallstrom.
Right.
GM. He was one I knew that was his thing. That was his specialty.
Right.
And I was I want to play in a game with him. And the greatest part was everybody was talking in Mid-Atlantic the whole time. And it was fantastic. Yeah. We got those guys on the run. It was so hilarious. But I wanted to answer Overkill Joe before we.
Let's see. Let's put ask before. Okay.
Yeah. I think it is well, this was not off grid.
Oh, I'm
Overkill
sorry.
further down,
I
yeah.
missed him.
About Sky
Overkill.
Oblivion,
Sorry,
Shadow Oblivion.
that was the one.
I played a lot of Oblivion, but I did not play as much Oblivion as I played Skyrim. I've had people ask me about Morrowind also. If I had infinite time, I would do it, but when I have to make a harsh call, but if you can get Shadowrim up to platinum, we'll talk about it. You know, right now it's gold. Right now it's pretty. It's I think at like 600. You got to get 1,000 for platinum. If we can get it up to platinum, then yeah, let's talk about it. But until then, I've got other things that I want to get out, and I don't mean this in a trite way, but I think it's really important from a production standpoint to not grind exclusively on one thing. So I've seen a lot of people see this in the Shadowdark space where they've come out with a setting, some part of something for Shadowdark, and then everything after it is focused on the first product. So they come out with a setting, and then they write a dungeon in the setting, and then they write a town in the setting, and then they do this. And if you do that, I think from a creative standpoint, you get bored. It becomes more like work. I think that's a big personal driver for me. But as you build out a wider variety of products, you get people who might not have realized that they would be interested in your style of stuff, because there's gonna be people who hated Dark Sun and they would never pick up Shadow Sun. But when I released Shadowrim, they liked Skyrim, so they picked that up, and then they said, well, maybe this guy wrote a good version of Dark Sun, so then they go back to the other thing. So I think in terms of brand and business decisions, I think it's good to have a wide variety of things, and then occasionally go back and go deeper on one thing, but not to. I wouldn't want to get pigeonholed as the guy who keeps making Elder Scrolls role playing.
Right.
Thing, like I want it to be as wide as possible. You do not need to be familiar with Skyrim to play Shadowrim at all.
Michael, you can always join my Saturday evening game if you want to play Shadowrim.
Yeah, it's all written as if, and a lot of this is like IP restricted. I don't want to have any references to
right.
Stuff because it would be
they're litigious as hell.
Yeah. So the map bears a resemblance to Skyrim, but it's not a perfect match.
No. There's
races like the Khajiit, which I love the Khajiit to death.
Right.
But I can't call them Khajiit, so they're called catfolk. That's just the way to, if you want every one of your catfolk to talk in a Khajiit accent, I'm totally down with that. That's awesome. But you don't have to. You could run all your catfolk as Russians. I don't know. It's whatever you want to do, it's fine. I get it. Or off grid saying you could run in as smaller supplements.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how much time do you want to spend on a particular thing. And I have been already starting to circle back to Shadow Sun, and I have pretty much maybe 75% of the way through a equivalent of like a cursed scroll for Shadow Sun.
Cool.
And then it will allow me, by using the cursed scroll kind of format, to roll out a few upgrades in smaller design, and then create kind of like an omnibus where it's all put back together into like a second edition or something. But I don't have to write the whole second edition at once. I can write it as, here's a supplement on what's going on in the fighting pits and the gladiator battles, and then here's a supplement that's based on what's going on over here, and then build those things individually, and then bring them all back together into a bigger update. When I first wrote Shadow Sun, I really wasn't sure how much IP problem I would have from Wizards,
Right.
and I'm of the position now that they don't even think of I don't think they even care about producing physical products anymore, really.
No.
Everything that they want to make is digital. And
Yeah.
as long as it's not something that you're throwing in their face, they aren't chasing after people. Just as an example, Kelsey has Drow in Shadowdark as Drow.
But yeah, but I don't think that they did not originate Drow.
Oh, okay. I thought that they
Yeah.
did. Okay. But like things like that where people are making, I have instead of a beholder, an eye tyrant
Yeah, yeah.
in
And
my
that's very
stuff.
common.
People
Yeah.
do that kind of stuff all the time. So
Yeah.
I think it's totally fine. I don't think they're coming after anybody anymore. So I think the things that I would make for Shadow Sun would be hemming closer and closer to the Dark Sun faithfulness. Just because I wasn't sure at the beginning,
Right.
and now
Well,
I feel like it.
you
Yeah,
couldn't
I
be
feel like
even with their
there's like a Shadowdark gold rush in the
Yeah.
sense that everything's up for grabs. If you want to make a Shadowdark adaptation to this or that, if you want to make an OSE adaptation to this or that, with Shadowdark kicking them in the balls, Wizards of the Coast is almost withdrawn from the battlefield, and it's open season. You can do anything you want, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, I don't think they're that concerned about it, like you were saying. I don't think that they really care about this niche hobby. Their logo, their brand, absolutely.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But the tabletop role playing hobby, I can definitely see them farming it out to one of their subdivisions. Sending it out to Renegade and letting Renegade, take care of everything. Once the only thing they want to do is at this point, and it's the only smart move for them, is D&D Go. All right.
Yeah,
If they can turn their Monopoly Go into D&D Go, and I'd be totally stunned if they're not already trying to do that. That's their moneymaker. All right.
They canceled their VTT. They pulled back on it. I feel like it's open. Kelsey has said that she thinks there's going to be kind of like they're taking a breather, and then they're going to come back in like a lion with a 7th edition, or some kind of 6th, or some kind of future thing. Maybe, but I don't know. For me, it just seems like you can develop anything you want, move in any direction you want. The vampire game that I developed was, I think there's a lot of people that like the vampire setting, the modern vampire setting, but they don't like the systems that are attached to it. They don't like the community that's attached to it also, which is a sensitive thing for a lot of people, but it is what it is. I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying this is the way it is. And so I wanted to make a game that would feel more like the Vampire Bloodlines video game, where you're exploring sites, you're pushing forward. It's like playing D&D. And it's not like playing Storyteller system or whatever. And so I've used the Shadowdark system to make it so that it's a very, very intense, fast thing. The idea you're going to go for years and years and years, like, no, your character's trying to make it through the next week without getting murdered. Like, this is a brutal setting. So I think that there's all these different ways to innovate with WotC having left the field, and we can just grab, it's open season, like it's a frontier, like grab any territory you want and develop it. Yeah, I don't know why they did what they did with the VTT.
No, it collapsed. They didn't have. I think that they underestimated the challenge of producing a V. If you look at tests, top of the line Alienware laptops. You know what I'm saying? Like they
Yeah.
were, it was like, all right, you're using a $5,000 laptop to run this thing. All right, which tells me that just to produce, and that wasn't even all of the, the nuts and bolts of the game mechanics behind the actual thing. That was just the visuals for a little bit of this and that, and mostly cinematic stuff that they were showing you.
Yeah.
It wasn't actual gameplay. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, what do they think the entry level to this VTT is going to be?
That's
It's
right.
like if you need a top of the line Alienware laptop, this is going nowhere. All right, because they were complaining about, that only the DM was buying books. Right? They were complaining about that the player base was too cheap. What do you think the player base is going to be? All right. One of the things with World of Warcraft and why World of Warcraft was so successful was, and still carried its like 10 million subscribers going into 7 to 10 years after its launch, was that they never upgraded the graphics requirements.
That's right.
It. You could still play it on like a Pentium 3 like 10 years later, and it would still be fine until they did those final upgrades where it's like, all right, now I have to buy a new computer after 10 years, and that's what they never quite grasped, the idea that you're not going to be able to come in, this late in the game, in the VTT game, and then have everyone just, all right, I'm going to stop playing my books and go to that. It's just not going to happen.
Well, there's a guy named Malcolm Gladwell. A lot of people might be familiar with. He's an author, and he's written a bunch of books. I can't remember which book this is in, but he talks about change over time. Seems to kind of be generally the thing that he's interested in, and he's talked about in one of his books about how industry innovations occur by new penetrating companies, not by the existing provider. And I really like the example that he has of, like, there was a time when you had people who cut ice out of a pond and put it on a cart and carried it in, and that's what people put in their ice box.
Right.
And there was somebody who came along and invented a machine that could make ice without the pond. But nobody who has a pond is going to invent that, because they don't need to invent it. They've got the pond. So this guy invents a method for making big, huge ice cubes, like the same size, but on demand for, at his warehouse, and then shipping you the ice. And he put all the pond people out of business because he created a stable, always available product with a consistent delivery, all this kind of thing. But then that guy, he didn't think, he would never have innovated, we need a machine in your house for you to make ice for yourself, because then he would be putting himself out of business. But somebody else said, hey, we're putting in these fridges, they're already wired for electricity, let's set it up so that they can have electricity going to making the ice. So all the steps in the ice making process were made by people who were coming from a totally different angle than the original producer. And I think that that's one of WotC's problems, is they're so consistent and established with digging the ice out of the pond that it never occurs to them to make a machine to make ice without a pond. They don't even see it as a possibility. So that's where they are. And I feel, it's almost like I'm embarrassed on their behalf when they blunder so horribly. Let's say, but then I remember that a lot of these people hate the kind of people that are in our hobby that they're very political, they're very ideological driven. And so then I don't feel sorry for them at all in that respect. But just as a business person, it's like, how can you be that dumb? It's stunning.
Yeah, they don't understand. Well, they all came from the video game era,
That's true.
and that even includes those that were, like Perkins loved fourth edition. Absolutely, that was his home game, was fourth edition, and it's like you could only love fourth edition that much because you were a video gamer, and that was his real thing. And I'm certainly not slighting video gamers. I'm just saying it's like it wasn't a great transition from video games to tabletop. It's just a totally different audience, and you can't approach it that way. Like I've been in both places, right? So I spent 15 years with just MMOs, and then I got back to tabletop role-playing games, and I had to shift my whole mentality again. I was like, no, this is going to run very much different. And I was never looking for a video game experience in my tabletop role-playing games. All right. So it's like when you're doing that transition between it, and you yourself have done that, right? You've taken aspects of Skyrim, but it's not playing the same way as you've made that transition, right? So it's like it's operating as a tabletop role-playing game. It just has some elements and influence of Skyrim, not mechanics of Skyrim, but elements and influence
of some game. I want to say it was Square Enix or somebody like that like a Final Fantasy thing or something, some kind of Japanese RPG, and they had made a tabletop version of it, and somebody had screenshotted it, put it on Twitter, and it went kind of semi-viral in the RPG community because it was describing basically creating save points for the characters in the part. Like, and yes, that's in a video game, but it's totally out of sync with people playing a role-playing game.
Right.
And when I was actually asked to, or given the opportunity to do the playtest that became 5th edition D&D. It was called D&D Next.
Yes.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah.
And I put together a group of people from my Google Plus circles that were, each person brought a different perspective that they kind of had that was different from everybody else. So that I was like, we'll have this kind of like dream team of people who could have insight into how this game would work. And Eric Tinkar was in that group. That was that was the first time I actually played game with him. And we had a guy in the group who was a diehard 4th edition fan, and there was for the most part that was not relevant. But then there was kind of a climactic battle where there was a humanoid that had wings. I don't remember what it was. It wasn't as small as like a Quasit or a demon or imp or whatever. But it was a human, like maybe an Aarakocra. I can't remember. And the guy started to flap his wings to take off to get away from the situation. And one of the players was like, "Hey, I'm going to cast this ice shard spell, and I'm going to hit him with it. I'm going to try to cut his wings so that he can't fly off." And so he rolled and he rolled pretty high on damage. And I said, okay, I'm going to say that he just can't get enough lift. Like, you haven't destroyed his wings, but you've messed him up enough that he can't get enough lift. And as a total stunning surprise to me, the 4th edition guy was like, this is wrong. You can't deny a movement mode to an enemy arbitrarily based on your opinion of whatever. And everybody else in the group was like, what? You know, like it was like, I can't believe
Yeah.
it. You know, he was coming from this mentality, almost like a board game or a video game.
Yeah.
Like it was, these are hard rules that can't be bent based
Right.
on what you might feel or think would be
Mm.
appropriate for the situation. And that was a real like eye opener for me, because I'd never played with anybody who had said anything like that before. And it was very, very interesting. I agree with Off Grid that there's a big impact here because the OSR is productive. I think that's the thing. Is it may be that we have a relatively small number of people, but they
Right.
produce an enormous amount of material and content compared to other parts of the hobby.
And innovation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say this as a fan of Vampire, but Vampire does not produce, Vampire the Masquerade, Vampire Requiem does not produce anywhere near as much third-party material, innovative material, stuff like that. It's just, they just don't. You know, that
Yeah.
the OSR produces a huge amount of DIY content constantly, and I don't want to get into the politics of this, but there's like a difference between the major political parties in the United States in terms of having a large stable of people to run in a particular election. And it's a similar thing here. Like if you don't have a deep bench of
Right.
40 candidates, then the market can't pick the best of those 40 candidates. The market's only picking from 3 people. The market's not going to be happy with you.
Right.
Like that's the kind of thing. This is, you know, this is politics of the Roman Empire as much as it is politics of modern United States. Like you need a deep bench of people to choose from, and the OSR provides that.
Yeah.
Even if you might look at it and go, oh, well, this guy, I mean, this is basically written in Word with no real good art or whatever. No, but it's made.
Yeah.
It's made. It's made. You know, how many things are being written in Word and then released for these other systems? Not very
Not enough. Not
Yeah.
enough. That's
so,
the thing.
Yeah. So that Crucible, there's kind of there's a solid historical argument that the reason why the European continent was so much more successful after 1500 compared to other continents was because of intense competition between a small number of states. And like if you look at, you know, India being almost completely controlled by one empire, the Mughal Empire, for most of that time, or China controlling a massive amount of territory, having France versus Spain versus Austria versus the Netherlands versus even having little states like Savoy or Catalonia, or, you know, little things like that. They create a dynamism that is lacking when you have a whole territory controlled by one massive conglomerate empire. And so I think this, again, the same thing occurs here. You have all of these small producers that are in competition, and somebody is going, well, I see what that guy did. I'm going to take those innovations and combine them with these other innovations, and I'm going to produce this. And then somebody else comes along and does this and so it keeps ratcheting up the progress in a way that if there's a market dominated by one producer, like White Wolf for a long time, or there's a bunch of other ones it's hard to think of in the moment, but you know what I'm saying. There's a lot of genres that are dominated by one producer, and that producer cannot innovate to the degree that the OSR can innovate.
Right. Yeah, and even like when people will, you know, they'll attack the OSR and they'll say, well, you know what, there's 1,000 games out there that are nothing but just like clones and they'll never get play or whatever. I was like, yeah, there might be 1,000 subpar games out there, but there's 5,000 games total, you know, and who else is producing those kind of numbers, you know? So it's and then when you're comparing it back to someplace else, then it's when you look at those producers that are the big name producers and everything, it's like, yeah, you might be producing, 4 or 5 titles per year. And, they're showing up on all of the bookshelves, but they're not selling. You're
Right.
just getting you could see it at Walmart, you could see it here, you could see it at Target, you could see it in the Barnes and Nobles or whatever. You'll see it on Amazon. Sure, it has all that visibility, but no one's actually, and you have all of that, and they run right into the same problem that they did with where TSR had too much supply, and no demand on it, and they ended up, they ended up getting stuck with all of that, and that was where they generated all their loss, I mean, Wizards of the Coast had to, you were getting their stuff that they were producing at Ollie's, right, for like 90% off. Yeah. And so it's not a shell game, but it's just like, if you're looking at visibility versus quality versus engagement, all right, visibility is the least of those. That's important, the least important of those. Yeah. The most important of all of those is engagement, and there's no or very, very little engagement with D&D at this point.
That's right.
It's had its day. They did not shift, forward with a product that made people say, "Wow, I need to get that." All right, and that's where they really missed the mark. There was nothing, when Shadowdark came out, it came out at exactly the right time, and it benefited from it. Now we're looking at like Daggerheart is exploding. Now, I don't know how easily Daggerheart is going to transition to a convention play game. All right. I know I just had the guest that was running it at a convention, but I don't know if that is such a drastic departure from tabletop role playing that it's going to catch on the same way that Shadowdark has. All right.
And the key will be if they have a second flagship, like the way Western Reaches has been for Shadowdark, because when Western Reaches went crazy successful, my take on it was that there for a year there was a lot of 2 years, I guess, even there were a lot of people playing Shadowdark, but there's no way of publicly accounting that that's happening, right? So you can have my home group run Shadowdark every week for 3 years, but we don't tell anybody, then nobody knows that that's what's happening.
Right.
But when we get to a second Kickstarter and it does better than the first Kickstarter,
that tells you,
then you know that people weren't just taking that book and putting it on their shelf and never reading it again, which happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But they were taking that book and playing it rigorously, taking it to conventions, doing all this, so that there was a lot of buzz for it. It's almost impossible to have a setting come out and do better. That Forgotten Realms is great. It doesn't do better than the Player's Handbook,
right?
Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
So it just proves that they, the system that we have for aggregating information is not clear. We have to look for signals like when a Kickstarter goes really successful,
right?
And I doubt he's watching right now, but I bet Rob Conley has had more people actually play Black Marsh than anything produced by Wizards of the Coast over the past 5 years in terms of getting actual play at the table of a particular module. They might have moved the unit. Somebody might have bought Radiant Citadel, but are they really playing Radiant Citadel? Are they really? No.
Yeah.
And you look at, I don't have the self-hatred necessary to read Radiant Citadel, but I've watched like Diversity and Dragons has a thing where he went through, and when you have modules that are written where the author is like, hey, let's figure out a way to use the detect thoughts spell to create fantasy communism authority, like where we have totalitarian control over your thoughts using the detect thought spell, and we've got people waiting at the gates to check all of your thoughts to make sure that you're not having any wrong think. Like, holy crap! Like, nobody's playing it. That nobody wants that at their table. Nobody wants to recreate North Korea as their D&D module. But these people are writing it and putting it in a book, and they're paying an enormous amount for high quality art. As much as we criticize the art, from a production value standpoint, extraordinarily high cost and artist quality and all that kind of stuff. I'd say that about 4th edition, as poorly as it performed commercially, the art for 4th edition was great in a lot of ways, really great. We didn't see a lot of the really bad art until this past couple of years, but when they have a book that has that level of quality of art, people might fall for that 1 or 2 times. They might buy a book and this book looked really cool, the art was great, but it's not that great. And then they go and they do it a second time maybe, and then they're like, okay, I'm not buying anything else from you anymore. But both of those books counted as sales.
Yeah.
So from a corporate perspective, they're like, things are going fine. People are buying the books. And then all of a sudden it drops off like a rock. And they're like, whoa, what happened? Because you have no way of getting any feedback from the market on whether they're even happy with the book that they bought you. They don't want to know. They aren't holding live streams on YouTube and asking people, tell us about your Radiant Citadel experience. You want to know. That is not happening. So they're intentionally not gathering the information that a business. Coca-Cola would never release.
I'm sure they're gathering the information. They're just not telling it because they know it looks bad.
Yeah, can you imagine Coca-Cola releasing products and people are like, "This tastes like ass," and they're like, "You're racist," and then they just keep making the terrible product. Like, why would Coca-Cola is not insane. They would not do that. But Wizards of the Coast is doing that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me. I'm not going to do that. Kelsey's not doing that. I give my money to people who actually seem to want to have fun and create good stuff.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have come to see what they buy as a reward system. And so I know a lot of guys who will buy a book just to support the person who made the book because they're like, I want more people making books like this. I don't have time to run this setting. But I know that this guy is producing old school quality content. I'm going to buy this thing. And it's a market signal.
Yeah.
The market is very clearly rejecting what Wizards of the Coast has produced.
Yeah.
And they ignore that at their own peril. They're losing tons of money. Disney has been losing tons of money for the same reason. Marvel is now getting to the point where they're going over the diminishing returns cascade. It's the same thing that if you don't deliver what the market wants, you will not be in the market after a certain. Once you run out of money, you cease to exist. And that's what's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. These are big companies with lots of money to burn through before they get to that. But, Chubby Funster doesn't have the money to make catastrophic decisions like that. Holy shit. If I started doing that, it'd be over. So
I was going to say one thing, when you were talking about there's no real measure to see how things are going. I'm going to counter that by saying if you go to the conventions and you type in what games, like the keywords, and see what games are selling, or taking up space at tables. The first year, I would say January of it was January of 2023. So Shadowdark was just being released. And I was going to page, and I said, let me see what Shadowdark is doing at Page. And then I ran the number for Shadowdark. I ran it for 5e, and I ran the search for AD&D First Edition and all the older editions. And I'm not going to get the numbers exactly right in my head right now. I think 5e, largely on the back of its organized play, was 80 tables. All right. Shadowdark just released that freaking month was like 55 tables.
Holy crap! Yeah.
All right. And then Castles and Crusades was like 23. And then the combination of old D&D, D&D Beck Me, and then up through AD&D First Edition was someplace in the 30s. All right. So those were game sessions scheduled to be run. And the combined of Shadowdark and all of the older AD&D, all the older D&Ds plus Castles and Crusades exceeded 5e for the first time. All right. And that's with 5e's organized play. The following year, the numbers were even more. The 5e numbers dropped. And now,
well, we need to get Eric to track this then.
Eric could definitely look at that because
I'm not familiar enough with it. He's way more familiar with the convention scene.
Right.
He could put together those kind of numbers. I've seen him put together numbers for like Roll20 game instances.
Yes,
because you can see how many games are run with a 5th edition character sheet versus Call of Cthulhu character sheet versus Shadowdark character sheet. So he's been able to show that data. But I mean, the last time that I've seen any kind of real attempt was Ryan Dancy shared a thing that Wizards of the Coast had done where they did some deep market research back in early 2000s. But I just don't think that they're like I said, I don't think they're interested in tabletop. They're interested in video games. They're interested in the internet. So that whatever research they're doing is not oriented to how are people actually playing the game at the table.
Yeah. No, they're not. They're not interested. They don't see it as a way to make money, and wow, that's interesting, Roger. So
only one game.
Only one game at only one 5e game, and it probably wasn't even 2024 5e. It was probably 2014 5e.
Yeah.
So I mean, it really has dropped off, and I'm not saying just at OSR conventions because some conventions are very OSR oriented. Rising Phoenix is a much more across the board kind of convention. That's in Massachusetts. And even there, you could see the numbers of 5e organized play dropping over these last couple of years. Page, it was larger, yes, but there was still a decline in the number, and it was overcome by the rest. Mike Merles just recently came out and he said that he was trying to convince Wizards of the Coast that their business model was a flawed model because they were thinking, hey, look what we're doing against and I'm going to paraphrase him, look what we're doing against the next most popular game system, how much more we're selling than them. And he tried to explain to them, I don't know if you've actually caught this clip. It was on X.
I've heard this argument. I didn't see him say it.
So he said, no, you're thinking of it wrong. He says, you think that you're competing against your next top competitor. You're not. You're competing with everyone else.
Yeah.
All right. And as soon as they lose that above 50% market share, they're finished. Yep. All right. Because they don't have anything that is going to push them back over there. Because in order to get back over that 50%, they need to have enthusiasm. And there is no enthusiasm around them.
Yeah.
There is a enthusiasm around anyone else that is bringing something a little bit different to the table. That's why Shadowdark exploded in 2023 and 2024. It's why Daggerheart is exploding right now.
Yep.
It's anyone that has the mere potential of shifting the way the pie is cut and
Yep.
shifting it to be, well, now everyone else is more than 50%. All right. And
Right.
that's what the goal really is.
And to go back to Malcolm Gladwell again, I rarely cite him twice in such a short period of time, but he has a TED Talk on spaghetti sauce that is fantastic. And he talks about the guy who revolutionized spaghetti sauce production in the 60s, 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy's innovation was realizing that there's not a perfect spaghetti sauce. There are perfect spaghetti sauces. And so what was happening was like the Ragu or whoever, I think Ragu was the main producer. They were trying to create one type of spaghetti sauce that would be perfect. And he was like, no. You need the kind of spaghetti sauce you're making, but then you need one that's chunky and you need one that's spicy and you need one that has the vegetables in it and you need this. And he's like, he went in there and he became their like research lead and he started developing all these different types of spaghetti sauces. Mm-hmm. And so there's people out there who didn't want to eat regular spaghetti sauce. They didn't like it, but they want the spicy one or they want the chunky one or whatever it is. And he's like, so you are trying to sell what you think is like the perfect version of one thing. And you need to think of it as you need to make multiple things to appeal to different people. And if Wizards of the Coast at the end of the 3.5 cycle had said, what we're going to do is we're going to make a new edition that's going to be called D&D Tactics. And it's totally separate from D&D Classic. That's going to be the 3rd edition version. Maybe that's just called D&D Heroic. And then they bring back an early edition that's called D&D Classic. And then they start making these so that they're making different games for different people.
Right.
And then maximizing their share of that pie. But what they did by killing 3rd edition and going into 4th and then killing 4th edition and going into 5th is they're chasing after perfect spaghetti sauce and they're ending up losing all the customers that they could get from having product variation. Mm-hmm. And I'm fine with gravy. Dwarven stuff could be gravy. I feel like gravy would be a dwarven specialty, but that's what they should have done. They don't know how to run this business. They don't care about it. They don't want to do it. Whatever it is, they could be dominating 90% of the market if they delivered multiple flavors. Yeah. But instead, they've decided we're going to force feed this one flavor on everybody, and if you don't like it, F you.
Yeah, I think what they probably did was they looked at the TSR model and they said, well, TSR made all of these different game systems. They made all of these different things, and they didn't, in the end, do well. All right, and so they don't want to water down their focus on just one tabletop role-playing game, and I think that, like you're saying, I think it was wrong-headed for them to say, hey, we shouldn't, if we're a publisher, we should be publishing different things, and at least getting different genres. I mean, why they didn't take their rules mechanics found in 5e and really do bring it into other genres as still producing their rules mechanics and saying, well, we're going to have a 5e version of Boot Hill. We're going to have a 5e version of Star Frontiers. I mean, utilize their own product, their own IPs. They own all of those IPs, and then just try to pitch it out there. They're still selling their product.
But this is a company that wouldn't even when PDFs became possible,
Yeah.
they wouldn't even sell their back catalog for how many years was it before they refused? So in that interim, it's not like people decided, well, we can't get it. Oh, well, we'll move on with our life. No, they just pirated it. So they lost all the potential for those early sales. For how many copies of Dark Sun or Planescape or any of those older systems that they could have sold to people? They could have sold tons of second edition supplement books, tons of things. Yeah, but they just refused.
Yeah. Well, they just
putting money on the table. It's just crazy.
If they ever said, hey, you know what? We're going to embrace the legacy by doing not just scanned copies of those older editions, but we're going to streamline them. We're going to, we're going to keep the essence of those games, and we're going to put out new printings, not new editions, new printings of AD&D First Edition. Just clean it up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Do different layout, different formatting, and put that out there. It would, and get rid of the stupid disclaimer that they have on freaking drive-through, and it would sell. It would probably outsell 5e, and that's what they're afraid of.
Yep. Well, I don't know if you caught this, but a short while ago was I can't remember what year anniversary it was, but it was an anniversary of Star Wars Episode 3. And they had set up a theatrical re-release for it because they were like, people, we might get some people who want to come out and see Star Wars Episode 3. And they sold more tickets to that re-release than the last like 4 or 5 things that they had made fresh. Like they moved so many people went to that re-release that's embarrassing as a producer. If I said I'm going to have a special edition of my first game I ever made and it blows away everything I've been doing for the past 5 years, they're like, well, that's pretty embarrassing. So I don't think they want to do that.
That's what I'm saying. They would be embarrassed by it because they know that they can't compete. They know that that's why they do so many reboots. They know that they can't compete it. So if they reboot something, produce an inferior product, it will make their current product look better than what it actually is. And that's the other thing that they do. They intentionally sabotage their own legacy IPs because they know that their current IP cannot compete against it. Not in its writing, not in its artistic style, not in, the only thing they beat on is that they beat the modern beats on the old is layout, and formatting and just cleaning up some of the rules.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if they took classic modules and just kept having people improve the map quality, create assets for VTTs, create all kinds of stuff. One of the things that, since we've talked about Skyrim a lot in this, I feel like Bethesda missed a massive easy victory that they could have just had like a 5-man team, like a small investment from their perspective. That just the only thing that they do is write new content for existing game systems. So whether that's Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 3, or whether that's Skyrim or Oblivion, whatever. And so they keep upgrading. And this Oblivion remaster that just happened is like proof that I was right for all these. I've been thinking this for a year. Like if they just kept doing that, I mean, if they came out with an expansion to Fallout New Vegas or Skyrim tomorrow, they would move an ungodly amount of units because the number of people who own that game who would be willing to pay $5 for an expansion to add a little bit more content to that game, and the development lift is so minuscule. All of the assets are already there. All they have to do is just use the same tools they've used to make the original game and expand it. They just won't do that. They just won't do it.
Yeah.
You're just leaving all this money on the table. You know, they could, if they just expanded the map of Skyrim by like 2 cells, you know, like around the edge, and then they expanded it by a little bit more. You know, they just kept adding a little bit more content, built more story into locations that already exist. I mean, how many caves are there in Skyrim that are just kill monster caves? They don't have any plot relevance at all. You could put all kinds of shit in those caves. With a 5-man team, you could be writing module after module after module, but just shove into the game like crazy. Yeah, the Off-Grid brings up, and you brought up this disclaimer. The disclaimer, it's not just like a thorn in the paw of the old school grognard. It's like a flag that they don't respect the original content. So why would they embrace it and move it forward in any way?
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's like if I think that the person who started the business that I work for was an idiot, why would I want to build on their vision, right? But if you think the founder of your business is a genius and you want to keep building in that vein and you're passionate about it, that's what people want to invest their time and money and energy into interacting with. Nobody wants to play the game that was made begrudgingly.
Right.
They want to play the game that the creator is like super passionate about having created. And it's just a shame because there's such amazing potential in properties like Skyrim or Dark Sun that I've done, Al Qadim, or I'm not into Ravenloft, but there's so many people that are into Ravenloft or into Planescape. What's the one with the airships that fly through the sky? Spelljammer.
Yeah. So I was like, wait,
people who are interested in those products, and they just spit on them.
Or they'll release a one shot of it and then never give it another moment's thought. Yeah. Like they did with Spelljammer, right? They had that one controversy around it. They could, but they released it and then just walked away. Never mentioned it again. No follow-ups on it. No content written for it. Same thing with the Citadel one. Even like Strixhaven. It's all one and done with them. They'll put out one product and then stop. No more support. No additional support for it. They've done that with their video games in the past. Like I first got introduced to Sword Coast Legends, right? So back then, I mean, you can see my Balrog back there from the collector set and everything, and that game had so much potential. It was everything that they were looking for. You could actually play as the DM and run the whole thing. Change and alter rooms as the players were moving into it. You can somewhat create your own maps, with it. But you could drop things in there. You could tag them with little messages. So as soon as they interacted with it, they would get a pop-up that would say like the message of what it does and everything. It was completely interactive. You could set triggers that would all of a sudden spawn 3 goblins that, come in through that door. It was everything they were looking for from a VTT. And their whole design philosophy behind that game was that it was going to support the sales of the book. All right, Descent into Avernus. When Descent into Avernus flopped, all right, or it didn't hit the target, whatever they were looking for, they immediately pulled their support from the game. The game was only out for like 3 months before they stopped doing bug fixing. They stopped doing everything. And then
I didn't know any of this. Yeah.
Within a year, they already shut it down. I was like, I've never seen an MMO taken offline in under 12 months. I mean, it was just insane how quickly they just, all right, that didn't work, because at the time they were so concerned about the tabletop role-playing game that they were willing to sacrifice a sales gimmick of a video game in order to do that. Now they're the exact reverse, right? They don't care at all about the tabletop role-playing, and they care more about the video gaming, which fell apart on them. They're
just I forget who said it earlier. They're just so out of touch with what people are actually doing with their product.
Right.
You know, like I'm not saying this to toot my own horn. I actually wish I could be more rigorous about it. But like, to me, like, a big part of my marketing is making sure that I find where people are talking about having played my thing, or, you know, bring it up and thank them for playing it and ask questions. Hey, how did it work out for you? How did you do? You know, tell me more. Well, what happened in the adventure? Blah, blah, blah. You know, and there's nobody at Wizards of the Coast that I'm aware of whose job is just to go around and find people playing D&D and like cheerlead them. You know, just a simple thing like that, like just somebody who goes around and is like, tell me more about your campaign. What happened when you guys fought the fire giants? What happened with this? You know, and just asking questions. I mean, you could almost at this point just program a bot on Twitter to find people talking about D&D, and it has like pre-programmed questions that it chooses based on what the people said in their tweet. And so if they mention a particular thing, it just spits out a tweet like back at the person, just to get engagement going around the thing that they're talking about. But such minimal effort, you know. It's a lot for me because I'm one dude. But if I had an 8-hour-a-day job where I was being paid to do this, man, I would be all over the place making comments to people about what they were doing with the product that I'm being paid to promote. It's nuts to me that they don't even have a single real person that does that.
Well, for a long time they didn't even have a booth at Gen Con. I mean, it was like they didn't even bother, you know, having a booth to sell their product at a gaming convention. You know, it was like they just left it for others to have their things on their shelves instead of them running their own booth. You know, and
it's crazy.
It just makes no sense. All right, so so it's getting on a little bit, and
almost 3 hours now.
Yeah, almost 3 hours. So you know, and we have a lot of people here, mostly from you, I'm sure. Yes, it's mostly from you. Oh, I've never seen this before. So I could see how everyone is connected through here. So 97 from your GC. So from your
Twitter. Twitter's great for
your Twitter. Yeah.
I mean, I made that comment. I try not to talk a lot about Twitter on YouTube because I think YouTube is listening. But yeah, Twitter is like, to me, the fact that Elon Musk bought it, whatever you think about his politics, it doesn't matter to me, to anybody. I don't care. By making an environment where people can just say things without being gagged constantly. I have a friend on every platform now. He's on Facebook, he's on my Twitter, he's on it, whatever. But for years, I just only talked to him on Facebook, and his name is Yuri Kurlianchik.
I know Yuri.
Good guy.
Yeah,
but he's Israeli, and I'd seen instances where he shared a video of someone making really horrific statements, and then he would share it and say, why do they allow this on Facebook? And then Facebook would ban him for having shared it. I'm like, he's sharing another problem. Like, why are you going after him?
Yeah.
Nuts. And so to have a platform where you can just do whatever. Like, that is so much gold. I can't speak about the Pinkertons on camera off grid. I'm not allowed to talk to me on private message about the Pinkertons. Yeah, but it's amazing to me. Twitter has been a game changer in so many ways, to have a platform where you can just do whatever. And I'm a tiny fish with 1,100 followers now on Twitter, and there's accounts with 75,000, 120,000 followers who in the past would have been banned because they said wrong things.
Yes.
Wrong thinking things. Whatever that is.
Actually, my first account on Twitter was banned because I responded to a video. All right. The video showed, I won't go into too much detail, but the video showed this guy that was getting beaten up. And they said, this crowd found a child predator. I could say predator.
Yeah.
All right. So child predator, and they beat the crap out of him. And the caption was, did this go far enough? So my response was, if he survived, no. All right. Permanent ban.
Yeah.
All right. All I wrote was, if he survived, no. And it was like, bang. Tried to appeal it. The instantaneous response back, no. Permanent ban. So I was like, well, holy cow. I mean, I hope that the person who posted it also, had some consequence for posting it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if I'm only responding to something and it was like, oh, you supported violence or something. I said, no, I was answering a question. But so, yeah, that was old Twitter,
Right,
so.
Yeah. And that's been fixed.
Yeah. And that's that. At least I still won't fall for those traps.
I'm careful. I don't talk about politics if I can avoid it in any way, because I don't see any upside to talking about politics as a person who makes stuff. But there definitely needs to be a place for people to say whatever they want. And I went to graduate school for political economy, and I don't do anything related to that now, for a long story. But when I was in grad school was when the Patriot Act and all this kind of stuff was going in. And I remember having a conversation with a guy where he was talking about how they needed all this stuff. And I said, the problem isn't when your guy gets the stuff. The problem is when the other team gets the stuff. If you want to give this to George W. Bush, are you going to be fine with Hillary Clinton having it? And if the answer is no, you shouldn't be doing that. So if you're not fine with your side being utterly blocked out and having all their accounts shut down because you've said something that somebody else found to be a problem, then you should not be advocating doing that to the other side, because time flows forward and you will eventually not be the most popular position. And when that day comes, you don't want to be on the end of the ban hammer. You want everybody to be able to talk. And I think that's a big thing. Like, it's been a big game changer for role-playing games, because so much of role-playing game controversy falls on a political axis. And for many people, they see it as an extension of their national politics. Whereas I don't think about national politics at all when I'm playing role-playing games. It's never come in.
Yeah.
I'm playing Gods of the Forbidden North right now. There's like Roman people that are settling in an Inuit landscape, and there's demons in the forest, and people are trying to kill us. Like, the idea that, oh, look, there's a Republican or a Democrat, like that doesn't come up at all. I don't know why people get so into that. Who cares? Who cares? But yeah, it's been a blight on the role-playing game community of having these controversies that are politically based bleed into activities that should have nothing to do with modern politics at all.
Right.
You know,
yeah, gaming should not. I mean, I've said it. Yeah, I mean, once in a while you'll get people that'll be like, "Oh, well, of course there's politics in gaming. You can't have kings and queens." I was like, "No, that's political theory. That's political, aspects of politics. That's not real world politics. We're talking about real world politics being brought into the gaming space. You shouldn't be having that kind of a conversation at your table because you're there to play a game. You're there to, you could have, elements of things like kings and queens, and you'd have wars, and you could have slavery, you could have this or that, but you're putting it into the context of a historical fiction, or a fiction just in general. And that's where the disconnect is, I think, for those that are saying, oh, you guys say no no politics in gaming, but you include this or that or whatnot. And so that's another whole argument we can go into, to 3 hours on that.
They come from a perspective where they only know the things about history that conform to their modern view.
Yeah.
And so if 100% of your knowledge of slavery comes from the American South in the antebellum period, and you don't know anything about Roman slavery or Arab slavery or Korean slavery or any of that stuff, then yes, when you encounter slavery, it's going to be very politicized to you.
Right.
But if you know that the longest running slave system in the world is in Korea, not the United States, and that there's been slavery, the word slave comes from the Roman word for Slavic people that were the same ethnicity base, pretty much, from a racial perspective as the Romans. If you know all these things, then when you see an orc who's a green person, and there's a goblin slave, and the goblin is an burnt umber person, then you don't see it as anything related to your political system. But like I say, if the only thing you know is your political system, then you're going to see your political system everywhere. You're going to see it in everything. It's amazing to me that somebody can look at a hobgoblin or an orc that to someone with my education and knowledge is definitely Central Asian in terms of their attire.
Yes.
And someone can look at a orc that's dressed like a Kipchak or a Mongol or a Cuman or a Tartar and go, oh, that's a Native American. Like, you have no idea what you're talking. Like, what kind of knowledge are you even bringing to the table? And so if the only thing they know is their myopic, narrow-minded view, then that's the only thing they're going to see. To a man with a hammer, the world looks like a nail.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's do some pitching here. So I am going to put up a couple shares. So here's the first one here. So I am inviting everyone to take a look at this. And so this is Terra Invictus campaign setting for Shadowdark. I'll do the Shadowdark ones. And then once that is up there, I think everyone should be able to see it by now. That's right. You can see it on your end too, Chubby.
I see Terra Invictus. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So everyone check out Terra Invictus, and then I didn't do share. So let's share the next one here. I should be better at this. There we go. And so this came up. So definitely take a look at Horde Wars and
DM Black basic and an advanced version of Horde Wars.
There's a bunch, but I'm just showing up.
But basic is kind of what you need to get started. Kind of like basic BX for D&D. Yeah.
So definitely check that out as well. And now stop share. And then the next thing that came up was Gods of the Forbidden North. And so here's a bunch of them. This is volume 1. There's a couple volumes. This one is for OSR. So this
I think this is a really interesting. Rob has kind of lamented the scale that he's gotten himself into, but I feel like it's actually a really interesting way that he organized it. So volume 1 is basically all of the surface locations on the map, right? And volume 2 is the there's the map. Volume 2 is the Underdark that's underneath all of this.
All of that,
So it has a full map of all the Underdark space and what's down there and all this stuff. And then volume 3 is the mega dungeon where the bad guy is. That's like, it's in the northern edge of the lake that's on the map. And so that's what he's writing right now. He had a Kickstarter for it that was very successful. So he's been rolling this out over months and years now. Like I think it's been a year and a half since the first one. But the scale of the content is incredible. And I'm not really giving anything away here, but like for example, in the second volume, he takes a location that is in the first one as just a place where the players can use as a base of operations. And then when the players are like level 7 and they're getting strong enough to go down into the Underdark areas, that's when you trigger all of these events that happen at this location that the players thought of as their peaceful home base, So he adds these like layers of interactions that are really, really cool. That I think it's really great. I'm running it for him is pretty awesome. Yep, Off Grid brought up. I also have 2 books called the GM's Companion and the Player's Companion for Shadowdark that are both platinum on drive-through, and all they do is take what's in Shadowdark and expand on it. So there's like 36 classes that are built in there, 24 ancestries, a ton of equipment and everything in the player version. And then the GM version has all kinds of tables and expansion. So like in the base Shadowdark, there's 1 hazard table, and you could get anything from quicksand to avalanche to magic hazards or whatever. And I made a hazard table for every terrain type. So there's a desert hazard that has all the hazards for being in a desert environment. You're not going to get, boulders falling on you with ice or whatever. You're going to get appropriate stuff for the desert. And then there's one for mountains and there's one for rivers, because I think there's 9 terrain types that it goes through. So all that stuff is just upgrading it. So I've had a lot of people tell me that they've used like either one of those books as just a great augment to their existing Shadowdark experience. Especially in the solo play arena, because I've had guys who said that they've been doing solo play, and they'll just, if a character dies in one of the classes, they'll just grab a new class. So every time somebody dies, it's like it's not even a sad thing, because now they're going to get a whole new, now they're going to get a Valkyrie, now they're going to get a Beast Man, now they're going to get all these different things that have come in as new options. So that's been kind of my shtick, is providing a lot more flexible content for the GM to use that builds into the Shadowdark system.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Negative Space, but
it's not that big of a deal.
It is what it is, man. I just roll with it.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. But anyway, so we're going to wrap this thing up. So thank you so much for coming on. And any of my viewers, you could look up Chubby Funster on X. I invite any of his viewers to join my channel here. I checked out your channel on YouTube, so definitely get out over to there and
I
check out
don't put
his
out a lot of
YouTube channel.
videos because I mostly make books, but
Right.
there are some demos of how to do like the solo play stuff that we've talked about.
Right. Yeah. So definitely go there and check that out as well. And when I close this thing out here, I will have, again, once this goes completely live on the video, then I'll be able to drop down some links in the first comment, and I'll pin that so that you can go directly to Chubby's store on drive-through and check out all of his stuff there. And I'll also link his Twitter, because he's at like 1100. I'm actually around like 968, which is the highest that I've been since my new account. So hopefully I can get to 1,000. I was just shooting for that. So and then once I get that there, and then just keep on following the channel. I'm going to start digging through, and I'm going to start doing some recaps of my Shadowrim campaign. We're looking to start that up probably after I return from vacation. So second half of July, I think we'll be ready to roll out. Can't run it this weekend, and next weekend is because I run Saturday night. So the next 2 Saturdays are occupied. And then the following one after that, I'm on vacation. So, no, that's the weekend before I leave for vacation. Maybe I will have one in 3 weeks. So I will have a game session done in 3 weeks. So if you are interested in playing in any of my games, I linked the Discord. I'm going to link the Discord again. So I will link my Discord again. So if you're looking for games to play in, just jump to my Discord there. You have Discord, right?
I do, but I don't run it as a
Okay.
as a channel. I have an account, but I have a private server that I use sometimes for games, just to keep track of setting information, or
Okay.
like if I ran a Traveler game and they were able to put all their ship information and cargo and everything in like a shared space, but I don't use it for promotional stuff.
Yeah, for promotional stuff. All right. So I will make sure to get all of your promotional stuff that you do have out there on the description. And thanks to everyone for stopping in. Very successful stream for me. That's for sure. I don't recall ever having 142. So thanks a lot. That's all on you. So you brought a lot of people on. Really appreciate it, and really enjoying this. I'm really looking forward to digging into this. And I'm definitely going to check out Terra Invictus, because that you sold me on that with the solo play, and I want to see how that actually works out. Cool. And I'll be covering that as well. So everyone, yes, your Wood Elf Archer is coming soon to lesser healing and cure disease at first level is winning. Yeah. So he's the sign of the horn. So yeah. So cool. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. I am going to shut this down in a second. It takes a couple seconds for it to go on live.